Boom. Bang bang bang. The moment the mini ghosts gathered on Ace, Perona snapped her fingers, and then a dense explosion sounded suddenly, submerging Ace in a cloud of smoke. Look, I'm really strong. I killed this kid easily. Moria doesn't need to send you to protect me, Perona said proudly. Yes yes yes. You are the strongest. The generals understood Perona's position in Moria's heart, so they could only follow him. But the zombie general standing at the end swallowed and poked the backs of the people in front, interrupting their desire to continue flattering. What are you doing? Perona said dissatisfiedly, she could hear it very well. The zombie didn't speak, but pointed forward with a look of fear. Everyone turned their heads to look, and their bodies froze at the same time. After the smoke dissipated, Ace was still standing there unscathed, and even the corners of his clothes were not wrinkled. Impossible. Perona screamed, and one of her ghost bombs could blow through the city wall, but dozens of them exploded at the same time just now. It doesn't matter if the other party is not blown to pieces, how can it be unscathed? Girl, it's useless, your attack can't break my defense at all. Ace shrugged. Impossible, I don't believe it. Perona floated up high and shouted, take me. Great ghost kamikaze bomb. A super large ghost with a diameter of nearly 2 meters suddenly got out of Perona's body, then opened its mouth wide, and went straight to Ace. I told you, it's useless. Facing the oversized bomb, Ace just calmly punched it out. Boom. The violent explosion destroyed the ruins of the hospital again, but when the smoke cleared, Ace was still standing there intact. Ace didn't bother to wait for Perona to make a move. After taking autumn water back to the space of different fires, he held up Slayer and walked towards Perona step by step. Several zombie generals were terrified in time, but they had to obey Moria's order, and at the same time stepped forward to protect Perona behind them. Base. Boom. The big knife in Ace's hand flashed several cold lights, one knife at a time, and cut these zombie generals in half at the same time. You. Don't come here. Perona was a little scared, she floated back subconsciously, put on a fierce look on purpose, waved her small fist and said firmly, I'm not afraid of you, I can still. There are even more powerful moves, but it was too cruel, so I decided to let you go. Come on, I forgive you for everything before. Ace was amused by Perona, but of course he was not stupid enough to believe her, so he grabbed her. Call. Ace's hand passed through Perona's body like this, as if Perona in front of him didn't exist at all. Ha ha ha. Seeing this scene, Perona was taken aback for a moment, and then laughed arrogantly. I am an invincible beautiful girl. You can't even touch me, so how can you beat me? There was a playful smile on the corner of Ace's mouth. If someone else was here, there was really nothing he could do about Perona. After all, who could hurt an invisible ghost? But Ace knew the principle of the Perona fruit, so he didn't hesitate at all, and the domineering knowledge color instantly scanned everything around him into his mind. Is there nothing I can do with you? Ace smiled, moved his feet, and his body suddenly disappeared in place. When he reappeared, he had already rushed to a small forest on the left side of the hospital. Perona originally had a smug expression, but after seeing Ace rushing there, she couldn't keep her composure anymore. Her soul body can exist outside of the body, ignoring physical attacks, but the body without the soul has no resistance to external attacks at all. And her body is in that forest right now. Perona panicked suddenly, and immediately flew towards the grove with all her strength. But Ace's speed was even faster. Under her desperate eyes, Ace had already walked into the woods leisurely. Boom. A muffled sound came, and Perona suddenly felt a sense of dizziness rushing to her mind, and then her soul was uncontrollably sucked by her body, and she fell into a coma instantly. At the last second, what flashed through Perona's mind was, I really still have a big move. I haven't had time to use the negative ghost. At this moment, Ace suddenly became a little embarrassed. Facing Perona, who was lying in front of her, who had no power to resist, he was a little bit at a loss. Men and women can't kiss each other. I am still very traditional. Or, kill her. After thinking about it for a while, Ace couldn't do anything. After all, Perona had never done anything harmful except for some princess sickness. So Ace finally decided to leave her in place, turned around and left the woods, and called Luffy and the three-headed dog to continue towards the depths of the island. But the monkey-headed spider Talara got out of the ruins at this moment. He judged from the beginning that he was not Ace's opponent at all, so he immediately decided to play dead in the ruins. The final result also proved that his decision was correct. Didn't you see that those zombie generals have turned into two halves? But when he saw Perona lying motionless on the ground, his eyes were instantly filled with fear, and some misunderstandings occurred in his heart. Lady Perona was killed? Talara could no longer imagine the kind of anger that Lord Moria would explode after knowing the news. Although Tarara was very afraid that Moria would take his anger on him, the absolute loyalty to Moria deep in his soul made him rush to the castle in the center of the island as fast as possible. Master. Master. Tarara was familiar with the island's terrain, so she returned to the castle before Ace and the others. He, Talara, did you catch that kid named Ace back? Moria lay on the throne with an excited smile on his face. Once he has Ace's shadow, he can activate the 900. No. Talara struggled, but finally said, Master Perona, she was killed by that kid named Ace. What did you say? Moria's eyes were instantly bloodshot, and his body released an unprecedented killing intent, and he asked word by word. Gudong. Talara swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Lady Perona is dead. Then you. How can you still be alive? In Moria's view, no matter what the reason, Talara must give priority to protecting Perona and die before Perona. Puff. Puff. Mariah's own shadow suddenly extended under Talara's body, turning into a dozen shadow spears, cutting them into countless pieces. Although Talara is a zombie, but before he dies, he feels horrible real pain. This is the special effect that shadow fruit can have on zombies. Looking at the dismembered corpse in front of him, Moria's anger didn't decrease by half. Perona, don't worry, I'll let them go and bury you with you right away. Walking directly off the throne, Mariah walked straight to the door of the ice store in the depths of the castle. Seeing Moria's gloomy face, the zombies guarding the ice store immediately ran forward and hurriedly pushed the heavy door open. Puff. The cold air in the freezer rushed out from the door in an instant. A few rays of light shone into the ice storage, and at the end of the passage of the ice storage, a huge head of a terrifying giant was faintly reflected. Moria walked through the passage and entered the ice storage. This giant with a mouthful of fangs was several times the size of an ordinary giant. He. Moria looked at the terrifying giant in front of him, and finally showed a ferocious sneer on his face. Oz, today is the time for you to be resurrected. It's a pity that I haven't found a powerful shadow that can control this body, so I can only replace it with a shadow mage. Moria hated Ace because of Perona's death, so he didn't care about the price of doing so. The shadow mage made by Moria with the shadow fruit will gain more powerful power once it enters the zombie's body. But doing so also has a side effect, that is, the shadow mage may be out of Moria's control. In the new world a few years ago, Moria was able to fight Kaido a few times by relying on the combination of shadow mage and powerful zombies. But from that time on, Moria never dared to do this again, because he found that after that time, the shadow mage had developed a bit of his own consciousness. However, it's only for a while, so it should be fine. Although Moria had concerns, it was hatred that prevailed. As long as Ozzy hammers that Ace into a pulp, I will take back the shadow mage immediately. Thinking of this, Mariah immediately summoned the shadow mage, and saw his shadow standing up from the ground slowly, and then Mariah did not directly convert him into a clone as usual. Instead, he pulled out a pair of scissors from behind, and separated himself from the shadow with a click. At this moment, although Moria also felt drowsy for a while, because he is a capable person, he can still stay awake. He, wake up, the legendary devil, Oz. With excitement on his face, Mariah stuffed his own shadow into the frozen body of Ozzy. Wow. After a while, Ozzy's body suddenly trembled, and countless shards of ice shook off his body. Immediately afterwards, his eyes opened suddenly, as if they were two huge lanterns, releasing blood-red light outwards. Click, click. The thick iron chain with a diameter of several meters seemed to be made of paper under the power of Oz, and it was easily torn into two halves. Gah. Ozzy hammered his chest, raised his head and let out a loud cry, as if releasing the excitement in his heart. Is this the devil? The two zombie guards who followed were startled. He broke the huge iron chain easily. Ha. It's really spectacular. This is the art of zombies. Another legend has been revived under our hands. At this time, another person suddenly walked in from outside the cold storage, and said, there is such an aura. Oh. Is it Hobak? Moria glanced at the person coming. He was in a bad mood at the moment and didn't want to talk to this subordinate. Yes, Lord Moria, I heard about Perona, so I rushed over immediately. Hobak grinned, saluted, and said, however, if you are really sad, my lord, I can help you. You made Perona's body into a zombie. Swish. Moria's eyes suddenly turned red, and without saying anything nonsense, he grabbed Hobak into his hand, and the strength in his hand gradually increased, and the severe pain in his body made Hobab's mind instantly occupied by fear. He had no idea that Perona had such a high status in Moria's heart that she would not allow outsiders to insult her at all. My daughter is also something you can insult. Moria adopted Perona from a very young age and regarded her as a daughter for a long time. Now that her daughter is dead, How can she be in the mood to talk nonsense with him? He didn't even give Huobake a chance to beg for mercy, so he squeezed him to death with both hands. Even the subordinates who can make zombies for them are not half as good as Perona. Throwing Hobak's body aside casually, Mariah dodged and jumped into the cockpit in Oz's belly. Ozzy, let's go. Come with me and kill that little bastard named Ace. Rumble. Ozzy didn't answer, but he shook all the solid ice off his body, and then punched the wall of the ice store without saying a word. What is Ozzy doing? The walls of the freezer are made of special materials, and it is impossible to break them. As soon as the doorman finished speaking, he saw Ozzy's fist smashing the wall open. The special material he was drawing seemed to be just inferior cotton cloth at this time, and a huge gap was torn open. Zizi easily stepped out of the ice house through the gap. He. If I had Ozzy back then, I would have trampled that guy Kaido to pieces. Moria was immersed in the pleasure of having such a powerful subordinate. It's just that he didn't notice that there was an evil smile on the corner of Ozzy's mouth that didn't belong to Mariah's will. Not far from the central castle, the two of Ace were moving quickly on a three-headed dog. Suddenly, there was a huge roar from the direction of the castle, and then a huge gap was suddenly blasted on the side of the castle, and then a huge giant with a height of 100 meters suddenly rushed out of the castle. It fell to the ground with a bang, and the shock caused immediately overturned countless houses. Even the three-headed dog, who was still some distance away from it, almost fell down due to the shaking. Little Oz. Seeing this figure, Ace's heart suddenly trembled. He thought of that little Ozzy Jr. who gave his life to save him in the war on the top. Call. Ace took a deep breath, endured the pain in his heart, and woke up from the memory. He knew that the giant in front of him was not the little Ozzy in his memory, but his ancestor, just a corpse. Where did Moria get the shadow? Ace frowned. This time Luffy could stand beside him, and Luffy's current strength is far from the height in the previous life comics. Take out the devil demon again and use the ability of the fire department. This knife is more suitable than Yi. At this time, Ace became more solemn than ever. You must know that even ordinary giants will be directly awarded the rank of Lieutenant General in the Navy. What's more, the Berserker Oz in front of him is far stronger than ordinary giants. Seeing Ozzy running straight towards him, Ace put the sword on his shoulder and said to himself. It looks like it will be a fierce battle. Ace, haha, giant. Luffy looked at Ozzy who was getting closer and closer, and he didn't feel any fear at all, instead his eyes flashed with excitement. Luffy, how did you learn the moves I taught you a few days ago? Ace was used to Luffy's offline, so he jumped off the back of the three-headed dog and asked casually. The 6 poses you taught Ace are too difficult. I only learned the 6 poses of shaving, Luffy then said proudly. I couldn't finish it at first, but then I found out that it only needs to be done in the body. Inject steam into it, and the shave is easy to use. Ace's face darkened. The reason why he handed over all the 6 style training methods to Luffy was because he was afraid that he would develop this life-consuming move again. Unexpectedly, history is always surprisingly similar. Although his teaching made Luffy learn the second gear much earlier, why is it still the same as before? Luffy, this trick will consume vitality, promise me, don't use it casually, Ace said solemnly. Listen to Ace. Luffy thought for a while, and then said, however, if Ace is in danger, I will definitely use it. Ace's heart warmed when he heard it, and he was about to speak. The huge Oz had already taken huge steps, destroyed the trees along the way, and reached in front of Ace and the two of them. Ace. Mariah's angry roar came from Ozzy's stomach. Immediately afterwards, Ozzy's movements did not stop at all, and the huge fist had already smashed down from the air. Ace's eyes froze suddenly, and without thinking about it, he turned around and slashed from bottom to top. The sharp knife light collided with Ozzy's fist, as if there was a shocking thunder explosion, and the airwaves were overwhelming. Ozzy's power is absolutely terrifying, and he can even lift a warship with his bare hands, but even with such terrifying power, his fist was deflected by Ace. Boom. Ozzy's fist hit the ground next to Ace, and suddenly the whole forest trembled violently. After the smoke and dust passed, a fist mark with a huge diameter suddenly appeared there. Ace stepped aside, his eyes became more serious, and the devil demon in his hand was still trembling because of the huge force. Ozzy, hurry up and trample them to death. Mariah's sharp voice came, I want to bury them with Perona. Ozmo remained silent, but ignored Ace, turned around slightly, and stepped on Luffy and the three-headed dog. Asshole. Ace roared angrily, and rushed over immediately, but the distance between them could not catch up now. Boom. Ozzy's foot stepped on the ground with all his strength, and sank deeply into the ground. No. Ace's eyes were red, and without hesitation, he exploded with 5 times the strength of his body, rushed over and slashed at Ozzy's leg. Puff. Even though Oz was a giant berserker with extremely hard skin, he couldn't stop Ace, who was in a rage. Slay Demon. Easily submerged into Oz's calf, cut off a third of it, and was killed. Its leg bones block it. The force transmitted from the knife directly lifted Ozzy's leg away. Ozzy couldn't stand still, and staggered directly and crushed a forest. But Ace didn't care about him at all, and immediately swung the dust away with his palm, looked into the footprints stepped on by Ozzy, and found that it was empty. Wow, woof. Ah, but it turned out to be a three-headed dog, and took Lu Fei to the side one step ahead of time. Call. The stone in Ace's heart has finally come down. It's interesting to have a loyal zombie brother. Damn it. Moria opened the curtain that Ozzy closed alone, and looked over with a gloomy face. No 82. How dare you help the enemy? The three-headed dog is obviously zombie number 82. After hearing what Moria said, he immediately broke out in cold sweat. Pat. The three-headed dog loosened its mouth subconsciously, and Luffy in its mouth fell to the ground. There is no need for traitors to exist. Moria waved his hand and said coldly. Accompanied by Moria's movements, the three-headed dog's eyes suddenly rolled over, leaving only the whites of the eyes in an instant, and then the three shadows were pulled out from its body by Moria. Little 3. Luffy looked at the three-headed dog lying motionless on the ground, and thought that it had accompanied him all the way and saved him twice, and now it died like this. His heart was filled with anger. Bastard, I'm going to beat you up. Luffy suddenly turned his head and looked at Mariah, glaring at him. Rubber, machine gun. Luffy didn't even think about it, and he punched Oz not far away with his dense fists. But his attack couldn't hurt the rough-skinned and thick-skinned Ozzy at all. He could only helplessly shout angrily, punching again and again. Enraged by Luffy's attack, Ozzy punched him again. Humph. Ace snorted coldly. The blade was entwined with a blue flame, and he slashed through it. Before Ozzy's fist hit Luffy, the flaming saber energy submerged into his fist. The terrifying high temperature burned the flesh on his fist to ashes, and even made Ozzy take a few steps back again. Ace. I'm not strong enough. Luffy was thrown back by the blast, unable to avenge the three-headed dog with his own hands, leaving nowhere to release the anger in his heart. Ace sighed. He understood Luffy's temperament, and he had to give him a chance to fight this time. Luffy, I will give you strength this time. But from now on, you must train harder to become strong enough. Only then will your friends and relatives around you not disappear like this time. Ace's words stimulated Luffy, and he agreed firmly. Ace nodded, then turned to look at the woods behind him, and said expressionlessly, How long are you going to hide? Take out all the shadows you have collected. As soon as Ace finished speaking, a group of ragged people came out of the woods. They looked at Ace with hope in their eyes. They are all people whose shadows were taken away by Moria, and now they can only hide in the gloomy woods in desperation to avoid being turned into ashes by the sun. At this moment, Ace's strength gave them hope of recovery. How could they still hesitate? I saw that they immediately took out shadows one after another according to Ace's request, and stuffed them into Luffy's body. After a while, a total of 70 shadows were crammed in. Immediately, Luffy's body swelled up, his skin turned blue-black, his arms became extremely thick, and he immediately possessed the strength of a lieutenant general. Nightmare Luffy. Luffy, your current strength can only be maintained for about 2 minutes. During this period, let us two brothers fight side by side. Ace looked at Luffy with a satisfied smile on his lips. Yes. Luffy agreed. His blue face was extremely firm, and the next moment, his body suddenly disappeared in place, and he punched Ozzy first. Spiritual fire, pure physical judgment. Break out. Haha. Chinglian flame / 80 layers. Ace laughed loudly, and swung a blazing saber energy that reached the sky, followed by Luffy, and slashed at Oz. In fact, their movements are very fast, so the time has only passed for a while now. Ozzy's palm had been burned into bones by the flames, and just as he stood firm, he saw two people on the opposite side attacking him. After Luffy turned into Nightmare Luffy, his strength increased several levels in an instant, and he suddenly appeared directly opposite Oz, hitting his chin with a punch the size of a sandbag. The huge giant with a height of nearly 100 meters was directly knocked off the ground by Luffy's punch, and temporarily lost the ability to move. In the next second, Luffy moved 10 meters sideways, making way for Ace's sword energy. Oz was in the air, and there was no way to avoid the swift sword energy. Puff. The sword energy sank into Ozzy's body, and bursts of blue smoke gushed out from the wound. Even though he's a zombie and can't feel pain, he now knows full well that he's on the verge of death. The abdomen was exerting force, and the body sank suddenly. He forcibly stabilized his figure, and was about to attack Ace, who was coming with a knife. But just when he clenched his fist and punched Ace, trying to crush Ace with his strength, Luffy suddenly appeared in front of him again, and punched him too. Boom. Luffy's fist was much smaller than Ozzy's, but he blocked the punch. At the same time, Ace had already appeared on the right side of Oz's arm, and slashed down with a knife. There was no accident at all. Oz's arm was directly cut in two this time. The stinky blood rained down from Oz's arm, and was vaporized by the high temperature of the flames into a gaseous state while still in the air. Boom. Ozzy's arm crashed down, rolling down, flattening a large forest. At this time, Luffy took a deep breath, twisted his body into a twist, and then roared. Rubber rubber, storm. Luffy's fists seemed to be raindrops in a violent storm, hitting Ozzy's body continuously. The one-armed Ozzy was trembling all over, and countless blood spilled from the wound. And Moria, who stayed in Oz's stomach, couldn't escape Nightmare Luffy's fist, and was beaten like chaff. The cooperation between Ace and Luffy seems to have been rehearsed countless times in advance, and it seems that the tacit understanding is abnormal. Wow, the victims hiding in the woods all opened their eyes wide in disbelief. That Moria is also in the stomach of this zombie? He is also being beaten? These two children seem to be about 10 years old. They are already so strong? Then, doesn't it mean that we have a chance to see the sun again? After being shocked, they all fell into ecstasy. As long as Ace and Luffy kill Moria, they can have a normal life again. Boom. With the last punch, Ozzy was suddenly sent flying by his huge body, smashing down half of the castle, and sinking deeply into it. After crushing Oz all the way, the time of 2 minutes finally came. Black shadows emerged from Luffy's body one after another. Luffy fell from the sky and returned to his original size. Ace stepped on the moon steps, took Luffy over, and gently put him on the ground. Looking at Luffy, who was still struggling to get up, he said with some distress, "You have done a good job, I will leave the rest to my brother." Damn. Moria didn't check for a while, and was caught off guard by the two of Ace. At this moment, his face was bruised, and the anger in his heart increased by 3 points, and he jumped out of the cockpit directly. Shadow gathering place. But at the moment Moria launched this big move, something unexpected happened to everyone. Suddenly, the Shadow Mage jumped out of Ozzy's body, with a wicked smile on his lips, and suddenly appeared behind Mariah. Puff. The Shadow Mage's palm stretched out suddenly, and it actually directly inserted into Moria's chest. Puff. Moria spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes widened suddenly, and he barely turned around. The expression on his face was completely replaced by horror. You, how could my avatar attack me? Hey. The Shadow Mage's wide mouth grinned exaggeratedly to his ears, letting out a sinister laugh. Puff. The Shadow Mage pulled out his palm and brought out a puddle of blood, which spilled all over the ground. Moria's body became heavy, and he fell from the air weakly, broke a giant tree, and fell heavily to the ground. Consciousness became a little fuzzy, and Moria gave a wry smile. It seemed that he still underestimated the side effects of the Shadow Mage, and even got out of his control at a critical moment of the battle. It's just a pity that I haven't had time to avenge Perona yet. Moria looked at Ace on the side, with a grim face, and his heart was full of unwillingness to get revenge. Molia. What's wrong with you? Suddenly, a little girl in a pink dress ran out of the woods on one side. When she saw Moria lying on the ground, she threw aside her beloved umbrella and rushed over anxiously. The ferocious expression on Moria's face was completely shocked, his eyes were about to pop out, and his voice became even more stammering. Hey, Perona? Molia, don't move, you're bleeding a lot. Perona cried and rushed to Moria's side, and helped Moria deal with the wound clumsily, wrapped the bandage. Even though her body was covered with blood, she didn't care. That Ace didn't kill you. Moria watched Perona carefully, wondering if she was injured. When I woke up, I passed out in the woods next to the horror hospital, so that Ace probably didn't intend to kill me. Perona's words made Moria's expression complicated. Doesn't that mean that he is completely to blame for his current predicament? Because of wronging Ace, this made the Shadow Mage out of his control in anger, and finally gave him the opportunity to sneak attack him. Ace watched blankly from the side. Although he was a little surprised by Shadow Mage's betrayal, he would not be so bored as to sympathize with Mariah. Hey. The Shadow Gathering Place. The Shadow Mage's voice attracted the attention of everyone present, and all the zombies on the Devil's Bark fell to the ground almost at the same time, while the shadows of their souls all moved rapidly along the ground, towards the Shadow Mage's body drill in. This is impossible. Seeing this scene, Moria spit out another mouthful of blood. This Shadow Mage not only developed self-awareness, but also used his own abilities. Although the Shadow Mage has escaped Mariah's control, there is still a faint connection between them, so he understands that if the Shadow Mage is not stopped, after he absorbs the shadows of the entire island, everyone on the island will be killed. Kill them all. Including Perona. Forget it himself, after losing all his partners in the new world, he was actually half dead. But Perona can't die. Moria has already experienced the feeling of losing her daughter once, and never wants to have a second time. Thinking of this, Moria pushed Perona away, and said loudly, "That Ace, I know I'm damned in your eyes, I don't expect you to deal with Shadow Mage with me, but I hope you can protect Perona Rona, what I did has nothing to do with her." Only then did Ace's expression change. He didn't expect Perona to have such a high status in Moria's heart. High enough for him to implore himself on the enemy who killed his men. After saying this, seeing Ace moving in front of Perona with a knife, Moria suddenly shouted, "Shadow gathering place." Immediately, half of the shadows flocking to the Shadow Mage were attracted by Moria. The two tried their best at the same time, and began to compete for the control of the shadows on the island. At this time, Ace's expression was unprecedentedly dignified. From the moment the Shadow Mage appeared, the Slayer in his hand began to vibrate crazily. And the strange fire system in my mind, after seeing the Shadow Mage, spit out a word very seriously. "Magic. You mean devil fruit?" Ace frowned subconsciously. "Yes, and no. Maybe it's more appropriate to use a curse." The system said so far, but refused to say more. At this time, Shadow Mage and Mariah also absorbed all the shadows of all the zombies on the island. The number of shadows on the island was close to 1,000, and they each absorbed half of them. After absorbing this amount of shadows, Mariah and Shadow Mage both became the same size as Oz. After the shadow was absorbed, the two huge monsters ran at the same time and collided with each other in front of the castle. Boom. There was a loud noise, and Mariah and the Shadow Mage clasped their palms together. The powerful force caused the castle on one side to tremble again, and countless gravels fell down. Boom. Boom. In the anime in his previous life, Ace had never seen Moria so desperately. I saw that he completely ignored the Shadow Mage's attack on him, and just kept tearing off pieces of the Shadow Mage's body in a way of exchanging injuries. Black meat. But his body was already full of wounds, and the blood was like streams, winding down his body continuously. "Ace, Master Ace. I beg you, help Mariah." Perona saw the terrible wounds on Moria's body, and her eyes filled with tears. Although she usually seemed disrespectful when talking to Moria, Moria was like a father in her heart. But Ace looked at her, but didn't speak. After all, Moria wanted his own life just now, and he had no obligation to help his enemies. Puff. At this moment, Shadow Mage's palm brushed across Moria's stomach, leaving another huge wound. Perona's eyes became more anxious, and she said anxiously, "Master Moria only changed his personality after all his partners died in the New World a few years ago. He is not like this." Seeing Ace's expression move slightly, Perona hurriedly continued, "As long as you save Moria, we promise that we will never offend you again, and we will give you all our treasures afterwards." "Oh? That's not enough." Ace would not agree to such a cheap thing. Perona burst into tears, and promised eagerly, "I can persuade Lord Moria to form an alliance with you." The corner of Ace's mouth slanted, and he said lightly, "Alliance is not enough. But I'll make the first move." In fact, because of the relationship between the system, he would not let the Shadow Mage go, but now the other party wants to send him money, and wants to convey greater benefits, of course Ace will not refuse. Now, Moria has completely fallen into a disadvantage, and the shadows absorbed into the body have begun to run out of the body one after another, and it seems that they will return to their original state in the next second. Remember your words. Ace glanced at Perona, and his body suddenly disappeared in place. Almost at the same time, Ace suddenly appeared between Moria and Shadow Mage. He waved the slightly excited, devil demon, in his hand, blocking the fatal blow of the Shadow Mage to Mariah. After Ace slashed away the Shadow Mage's arm, his expression moved slightly. He never thought that slaying demons could convey clear emotions. And at this time, Zumo kept making excited sword chant sounds. Doesn't it mean that this knife also has a sword spirit? In the middle of the battle at the moment, Ace couldn't think about it. He threw the unconscious Moria to Perona, and immediately slashed 3 flaming sword chi at the Shadow Mage. The cyan sword energy submerged into the Shadow Mage's body in an instant, producing an unexpected effect. Originally, the Shadow Mage grinned at Ace's sword energy, as if he was not afraid at all. After all, his body is a shadow. Except for Moria, who has the ability, no one else can hurt him at all. But as soon as the sword energy entered his body, his smile froze on his face, and then a shrill scream that seemed not to belong to human beings came out of his body. Devil Demonis, if born to be the nemesis of the Shadow Mage, it caused huge damage to it. For a moment, The shadow mage's body seemed to be a ball of liquid, which suddenly boiled up. In the center of the body was a monster with 2 horns, covered in scales, and a demon tail behind it, constantly struggling and screaming. Ace frowned. Could this be the demon that the system called? However, the battle is not the time to think about problems. The Slayer in Ace's hand was shining with red light, and it kept inserting into the shadow mage's body, as if it had burst a balloon. Shadows kept running out of the wound stabbed by Ace and flew towards the sky, and the shadow mage's body shrank like a deflated ball, gradually revealing the figure of the demon in the center of the body. Damn. I have been hiding in Moria's body for so long before I found this opportunity to escape. How can I be disrupted by you, an inexplicable kid? The shadows absorbed by the shadow mage finally escaped, and the devil showed a hideous expression on his face, staring at Ace and saying, "You have a devil fruit too." Although Ace didn't eat the devil fruit, but now he can't help but stare at him, waiting for him, not knowing what this guy means. But I saw that the demon suddenly jumped out from the shadow mage, leaving only Moria's real shadow in place, and then he slammed into Ace's head at a speed that was completely impossible to catch. Ace's complexion changed drastically. He didn't want this inexplicable thing to stay in his body. But in the next second, the Zon heavy ruler in the different fire system trembled slightly, and the demon rushed out of Ace's head at a faster speed. At this time, his face was already full of fear, and he made a sharp voice, screaming, "What is that? You are not a devil fruit user." Humph. Ace closed his expression and snorted coldly. How could he let this guy tell his biggest secret? So without hesitation at all, the devil demon, with his right hand suddenly slashed down, splitting the demon in half. Black smoke continuously shot out from the demon's body. The expression on his face seemed to freeze. His body was like a melting snowman, turned into smoke, and disappeared from the spot out of thin air. Hey, and the devil execution sword that beheaded the demon suddenly made a crisp sound at this moment, and it was directly promoted to the rank of the big fast sword. Seeing this scene, Ace's expression moved slightly, thoughtful. Did Zhu Mo advance directly without swallowing the big fast knife? It seems that the name of this knife is indeed meaningful. Devil fruits weren't originally called that. They are the most amazing treasures in this world. They are indeed cursed now, but it's not the so-called sea that curses them. The system's words came into Ace's ears leisurely. Is there a devil like this in every devil fruit? Ace's face was a little ugly. After all, he let Ain and the others eat the devil fruit. No, it's usually just an ordinary curse. This is obviously a special case. Hearing the system's words, Ace's face looked better, but he became more curious about the purpose of the system. However, when Ace asked a question again, the system stopped answering him, and Ace cursed secretly for being unreliable. Molia, don't die. At this time, Perona's cry woke Ace up from his thoughts. With a dodge, Ace crossed a distance of more than 10 meters and came to the two of them. At this moment, Mariah was dying, and his weird figure was slowly shrinking. The ugly onion just disappeared, and he turned into a slightly handsome middle-aged man. Ace thought about these changes. It should be the devil in the fruit, which made Mariah's appearance and personality so weird. Pay. Perona, I may not be able to do it. Moria reluctantly stretched out a hand, touched Perona's small face, squeezed out a smile, and even asked in a panic, can you call me Daddy? Perona couldn't cry at this time, so she could only keep nodding and shouting, Dad, you will be fine, just hold on. Ha. Ha ha. Poof, Moria spit out another mouthful of blood, then suddenly turned to look at Ace, and said, Ace, I know. I was wrong before, you will forgive me. But Perona is indeed innocent. I hope you can take her to leave together after my death. Moria has fully recognized Ace's strength in this battle. He has been a pirate for so many years, and of course he has countless enemies. He doesn't want Perona to be hunted down by those enemies after his death. Ace raised his eyebrows. To be honest, Ace has never had a good impression of Moria. This person has a strong fruit ability, but he prefers to rely on the power of others. He is arrogant and cruel to the enemy. But watching this scene today, Ace has to admit that human nature is complex. There are no absolute bad guys, and no absolute good guys. Mariah is a true villain, but he also has these moments of genuine emotion. Of course, this does not mean that Ace will help his former enemy for free. I refuse. Ace's lips curled up. Moria was anxious, and a few strands of blood gushed out of his mouth again, but he couldn't say anything about Ace. After all, just half an hour ago, he was still thinking about how to kill Ace. If you want to take care of Perona, just do it yourself. Ace carried Slay Demon on his back. After hearing what Ace said, Moria felt even more aggrieved. He was going to die, but Ace still made fun of him. I have a way to save you, but the price you have to pay will definitely not be small. Ace put his hands behind his back, looked down at Moria and said. Moria's eyes lit up. Who would want to die if they could live? But he did not agree, but asked cautiously, what price? Give up your dream and become my subordinate. Ace's cold voice seemed a bit ruthless. The choice for Moria was not a partner, but a pure subordinate. But this is already the minimum price he can give this enemy. Alliance. Non-existent. If refused. Okay, then you go to hell. Moria's pupils shrank at this time, and Perona on the side said anxiously, Father, you can't promise him. Then you will have no chance to realize your dream and become One Piece. Perona's father seemed to make Moria make up his mind instantly. He was already dead in the first half of his life. Why not use his dreams in exchange for his life to get along with his daughter now? This deal is a bargain. I promise you. Moria was still lying on the ground, but after saying these 4 words, he seemed to have relieved the burden in his heart and showed a relaxed smile. It is good. Ace laughed out loud. He didn't just say that he could save Moria just now. The system sent him a message in his mind. The demon in Mariah's body is far more powerful than the curse of other devil fruits, and it can even leave Mariah's body and have its own consciousness. But in this way, after destroying it, Mariah was a blessing in disguise. As long as he survived, he could completely get rid of the curse of the devil fruit. Of course, Moria is dying now, and there is no way to save his life with normal methods. Lifting Moria with one hand, he brought Perona to the motionless shadow mage. Perona, take out Moria's soul, Ace ordered. No. Only when others don't resist, can I draw out their souls. Moreover, once drawn out, this person will definitely die. I can't do this. Perona widened her eyes and refused repeatedly. Just do as I say, I promise nothing will happen, Ace explained with a frown. Of course he knows that Perona's ghost fruit is still different from Big Mom's soul fruit, but as long as the soul can be drawn out. Do as he says. Moria turned pale, preventing Perona from continuing to speak. Perona had no choice but to grit her teeth, walked to Moria's side, reached out and pressed his head, and then squeezed and raised her little hand, and slowly pulled out a small transparent Moria from his body. Of course Moria would not resist her daughter. However, as soon as Moria's soul came into contact with the air, countless cracks began to appear immediately. Perona looked at Ace anxiously. If Ace lied to her at this time, then Moria would definitely die. Ace lamented the magic of the devil fruit, then stretched out his hand and pointed at Moria's soul, and immediately sent a soft energy from the different fire system, wrapped Moria's soul, and made his soul stable down. Then, Ace controlled this energy and moved Mariah's soul horizontally over the Shadow Mage. At this time, the demon in the Shadow Mage had been eliminated by Ace, so he closed his eyes tightly, and it was just an empty shell. Ace controlled the energy and directly fused Moria's soul and his shadow together. After a while, Shadow Mage's eyes opened suddenly, and Moria's voice came out of his mouth. This is. Moria looked at his body in disbelief. He was actually integrated with his shadow? Thinking of this, Moria's shadow body suddenly spread out, turning into a pool of shadows, and laying directly on the ground. Then he could see a group of black shadows, moving rapidly on the ground. Nothing could block his steps. Perona covered her mouth in surprise, but Ace had expected that her body would be the shadow directly. This is the truly terrifying part of the shadow fruit. From then on, Moria should be the scariest assassin. Grown-ups. Moria suddenly got out from in front of Ace, bowed deeply directly, and lowered his proud head in front of Ace. It's not that Mariah left without thinking, it's just that he can feel that his life is now completely in the hands of Ace. As long as Ace has a thought, he can die directly. Don't worry, I'll set a period of 10 years for you. After 10 years, I will definitely remove the restriction in your body. It's up to you to decide whether you go or stay at that time, Ace said with a smile. Hit a stick and give a sweet date, and only then can you really conquer the sincerity of your subordinates. Yes. Mariah replied respectfully. When Perona ran forward with concern and hugged Mariah's arm, his only unwillingness disappeared. After being so close to death, Moria finally understood what she wanted and dreamed, but more importantly, her family. Moria smiled and touched Perona's head, but Ace was the happiest among all the people present. Earn a lot. After fighting Ryoma first, he got the big sharp knife, Chu Shui. Immediately afterwards, after Zumo killed the demon, he was directly promoted to the big fast knife. Also, I accidentally subdued Moria, a strong man of Shichibukai level. Moreover, the current Moria, because of Ace's relationship, has completely eliminated the curse of the devil fruit, and is completely integrated with the shadow, and his strength can be said to be even higher. An absolute bounty. The most important thing is that Ace has already faintly felt that after this battle, his physical strength is only one step away from breaking through to the rank of Lieutenant General. At this time, the victims in the forest sent Luffy over tremblingly, and said cautiously, "Master. Sir, can we go?" After asking, they didn't dare to vent their anger. Joke. Although this ace looked like a child, he was someone who easily defeated Mariah. If he was in a bad mood and killed them casually, where would they go to reason? At this moment, their shadows have finally returned, and they can't wait to break through the fog and enjoy the comfortable sunshine, so it is right to be humble to their benefactors. "Do you have a way to get out of the Devil's Triangle?" Ace asked in surprise after taking Luffy. "We have a navigator inside. Although we are not absolutely sure, we don't want to stay here for a minute." This sentence got everyone's frantic nods of agreement. "Don't be so troublesome, I can use ghosts to lead you out." Perona's words reminded Ace that the powerful navigator next to Moria should be Perona. In fact, after thinking about it, I understand that as long as Perona releases countless ghost clones to explore the way, there is no place where she can be trapped. "You prepare some supplies for me first, and then send us out too," Ace hugged Luffy and said to Moria. "Don't you want us to follow?" Moria asked with some doubts. He thought he would follow Ace from now on as his subordinate. "No need." Ace showed a meaningful smile and said, "Our relationship cannot be revealed yet. Ace's identity is too sensitive. If the Navy knows about Moria's relationship with him now, it will definitely be detrimental to Moria's future development. What's more, in less than a year, the world government will launch the Shichibukai policy. Only when Moria obtains the status of Shichibukai can he have a greater effect on Ace. Before I leave, I want to ask you a few things," Ace said seriously. "First of all, you must give priority to exercising your body. A strong body is the basis for developing fruits. Secondly, your shadow body is very advantageous for practicing assassination. I suggest you develop this ability. Last point, within a year, the world government will have a Shichibukai policy. I hope you can get a spot." Since the demon in his body was removed, Moria's mentality has become a lot more normal. After he respectfully accepted the order, he immediately turned around to prepare supplies for Ace. And Ace also hugged Luffy and went straight back to the small sailboat. Not surprisingly, Brook was lying in the cabin and sleeping soundly. Ace shook his head with a smile, and put Luffy on the bed. Then he sat down cross-legged, with a hint of excitement on his face. It was time to be promoted to Lieutenant General. The Properties panel is called up. Attributes. Constitution. Major General, 10 Spiritual Fire Essence Body Art, the 4th stage. Body Energy. 199 200ths Different Fire, Qinglian Earth Heart Fire. It's a little embarrassing. Just what the hell is it? Although he wanted to vomit blood in his heart, Ace had no choice but to stand up and do more than 3,000 push-ups, plus 3,000 squats, to replenish the last bit of pure body energy. Call, strengthen. The property bar changes instantly. Attributes. Constitution, Lieutenant General, 0. Spiritual Fire Essence Body Art, the 4th stage. Body Energy. 0 210ths Different Fire, Qinglian Earth Heart Fire. Finally reached the physical strength of a Lieutenant General. Ace was in a good mood, and his consciousness couldn't wait to shrink into the different fire system. This time, in the familiar Hall of Different Fires, besides the Xuanzhong ruler, there is actually a small medicine cauldron. Congratulations to the host for reaching the rank of Lieutenant General. You can now choose 2 low-level strange fires. The system didn't talk nonsense, and directly transferred the remaining 9 low-level strange fires to Ace. And Ace had plans long ago, so he chose the number 14 Falling Heart Flame without even thinking about it. As soon as the thought moved, an orange-red serpentine flame burst out from the stone pillar on the far left, poured directly into Ace's body, rushed to his heart and took hold. Immediately, a steady stream of heart fire was generated from Ace's heart, and began to temper Ace's body uninterruptedly, and the tempering effect was even better than Ace's usual exercise. Worthy of being the so-called cheating tool of the heavenly flame. Ace smiled all over his face, very satisfied with the effect of Falling Heart Flame. Immediately afterwards, Ace turned his attention to the stone pillar in front of him again. After some thinking, Ace finally chose the number 17 Volcanic Stone Flame. There is nothing special about this different fire itself, but it can be fused with the 7th-ranked middle-level different fire, Juyu Jinzuhuo, to form a new type of different fire that can compete with high-level different fires. Therefore, the cost performance of choosing Volcanic Stone Flame can be said to be very high. After Ace made his choice, the Crimson Volcanic Stone Flame also trembled, rushing directly into Ace's body from above the stone pillar. Call. Feeling the 3 different fires in his body, Ace let out a long breath and smiled with satisfaction. I don't know if the 4-color Buddha's Wrath Fire Lotus can leave a deeper impression on the Red Dog. As long as Ace can fully control the 3 different fires, relying on his lieutenant-level physical strength and controlling the Buddha's wrath fire lotus formed by them, even if he encounters an enemy of the quasi-general level, he may not be unable to fight. Just when Ace was about to leave the system space, the small cauldron in the center of the hall suddenly opened, and a pill the size of a longan floated in front of Ace. Ace reached out to take the elixir. Feeling the majestic aura emanating from the elixir, he waited for the system's explanation with some doubts. This is the 6th grade elixir, Kingming Shodan, which can increase a person's lifespan by nearly 10 years, and a person can only take 1 pill in a lifetime. The system paused, and added, "This is the first time you have killed a demon, reward." Ace's expression was really moved at this moment. The value of this elixir is really too high. In the world of One Piece, there are countless strong people who are old, and their strength is far from their peak. But if you take this elixir, it means you will be 10 years younger. If outsiders know about it, there will definitely be countless strong people going crazy for it. But apart from these benefits, Ace had more in mind. The weapon given by the system is named Devil Killer. After beheading the so-called demon, the system gave such a precious reward. These things have revealed the true purpose of the system, the tip of the iceberg. These demons are the real enemies of the system. What? A scream interrupts Ace's thoughts, and Brook suddenly rolls around the room. My shadow was cut off. It's scary. Immediately afterwards, he suddenly seemed to remember something. First he scratched his hair, and when he found that the explosive head was still there, he breathed a sigh of relief, then lifted his skull, and took out a sound shell from inside. After careful inspection, and after confirming that the sound shell was intact, the stone in Brook's heart was completely put down. Ace silently walked behind Brook, sighed, and asked, "Do you still want to see Rab?" After hearing Ace's words, Brook suddenly turned his head to look at him. His face was full of nervousness, his mandibles trembled a little. As if he wanted to make sure he heard correctly, he asked cautiously, "Master Ace, are you just talking about Rab?" "You heard me right, I'm talking about the island whale named Rab." Before Ace finished speaking, Brook stood up abruptly, and rushed to Ace with a look of excitement. "Have you seen Rab? Is it okay?" Ace hesitated for a while, and finally decided to tell the truth. The bond between Brook and Rob was too deep. This kind of feeling made Ace feel that even a white lie was superfluous. "I haven't seen Rob, but I know that he has been guarding the Twin Straits day and night for these years, waiting for you to go over the upside-down mountain to meet him." Eston paused, and then said, "I think, if it can't see you, it will just wait like this until it dies." At this time, Brook had been crying for a long time. It turned out that he was not the only one who had been waiting alone. It's 40. The vicissitudes of life change and pass away with the passage of time, but at the far end of the ocean, there is still a partner who has been silently waiting for them for a promise. I am not alone at all. Brook covered his face with his hands, and tears continued to flow from between his fingers. This man who endured 40 years of lonely life finally shed tears for the first time. In 40 years, he has changed from an uncle to a skeleton, only this thick hair remains the same. Therefore, he regards the afro as more important than his own life. If the hair is gone, he is afraid that Rab will not recognize him when he meets Rab again. Ace watched quietly from the side. The tip of his nose was also slightly acidic. Yes. That little whale has now grown bigger than the island, and even has an ocean in its body. But Rab has never forgotten the agreement with the Rumba pirates. For decades, he has been bumping his head against the hard red earth continent, scarred and neighing sadly, just to meet them again. Sadly, the Rumba pirates had all died in battle on the Great Channel decades ago. Rob's waiting is destined to be extremely long, and there is no hope in sight. Ace has decided at this time to help Brook and complete their agreement. For Brook, and for Rab. At some point, the button of Yinbei was touched, and the familiar singing voice echoed in the cabin. "Yo ho 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 yo ho ho, bring Bink's wine to you. Like the sea breeze, ride the wind and waves at will." On the other side of the sea the sunset is also noisy. Song of birds draw circles in the air goodbye to Hong Kong's Silk Town. Let's sing a song. Gold waves and silver waves also turned into splashes. This song is a song that my partners and I sang with our lives. Brook carefully held up the sound shell. It's the dying chorus of the Rumba pirates. I have been wandering alone in the dark sea for 40 years, and every time I am about to be driven crazy by loneliness, I will listen to this song. Brook hummed softly, with tears on his face, said with a smile, "My partners seem to be standing in front of me again. But they're all dead, they're all dead." Brook repeated, "I'm the only living, dead, left, I can't see hope." Ace doesn't interrupt, he can feel Brook's pain. But, Master Ace. Brook put the sound shell back into the skull, I have never been so grateful for the ability of the fruit of the underworld, and I have never been so grateful that I am still alive. I hope I can deliver the chorus of the Rumba Pirates to Rab. Brook suddenly bent down and bowed 90 degrees to Ace. Master Ace, please let me follow you. Why not? Ace smiled and helped Brook up. Next, Moria prepared some fresh water and food for him according to Ace's order, and also stuffed gold jewelry worth 100 million Baileys into Ace's small sailboat. In this way, Ace has a wealth of 100 million in this small boat. Little local tyrant. With this money, the next step is to go to the capital of Seven Waters to change to a better boat. After all the supplies were ready, Ace took Luffy and Brook, and under the guidance of Perona's ghost clone, sailed out of the Devil's Triangle Sea area. And Mariah still stayed here. According to the training method left by Ace, while exercising physical skills, he developed the ability to assassinate. Whoa. Ace vigorously unfolded the black banner in his hand, on which was a ferocious skull wrapped in flames of various colors. Appreciating his work with satisfaction, Ace hoisted the homemade pirate flag on the mainmast of the small sailboat. Luffy's body has fully recovered, and after this battle, his physical strength has also been greatly improved. After seeing Ace raising a pirate flag to the bow, little stars flashed in his eyes, and he asked enviously. Ace, is your pirate group established? Haha, Yandy Pirates. Ace said with a smile. How about it? Why don't you join my pirates, Luffy? No. I'm the man who wants to be the One Piece. Luffy said stubbornly, holding his straw hat. Ace didn't take it seriously. He had expected Luffy's answer a long time ago. He knew his brother too well. But man. Of course you have to have your own dreams. One Piece. Ace narrowed his eyes slightly. If the younger brother likes this title, he can give it to Luffy. His goal is more than that. Standing at the bow of the boat, looking at the endless sea, the corner of Ace's mouth slanted. It's hard to come to this world. How can we not make a mess? Ace. Suddenly, a loud roar came from the end of the horizon, and Ace looked over subconsciously. I saw the waves churning on the sea a few miles away, and a small boat like a western coffin was galloping towards this side. On the boat, a man wearing a black top hat with white fluff on his head and a burgundy-patterned jacket, with a pair of sharp eyes like a falcon, burst out two fiery gazes, staring at him from a distance. Ace. Hawkeye. Ace's pupils shrank suddenly. How could the world's #1 swordsman know himself in this period? But despite his doubts, Ace still looks forward to meeting Hawkeye. After all, as a swordsman, Hawkeye's powerful strength and elegant temperament have to be admired. The distance of several miles was just a blink of an eye for Hawkeye Mahawk's galloping boat, and he came to Ace's boat in an instant, and came to Ace's side in a flash. Are you Ace? Hawkeye looked up at Ace, and asked with a trembling voice, is that supreme sharp knife, in your hand? Ace froze for a moment, only to realize that the long sword on Mahawk's back was just an ordinary sharp knife. He seemed to understand the purpose of Hawkeye's trip, and with a flip of his right hand, was taken from the space of different fires by him. Take it out. At this moment, a black streamer flashed, the air screamed, and the sharpness of the supreme sharp knife was fully revealed. And Mahawk's face suddenly showed excitement. The shiny black blade, and the densely packed heavy flowers on the blade, must be the legendary supreme sword, However, because he was not sure what Ace meant, Mahawk still put his right hand on the handle of the knife behind him. As long as Ace shows the slightest hostility, even if the knife in his hand is far inferior to, Hawkeye is absolutely sure to take Ace down. Give it to you. Ace said with a smile. What? What? Mahawk's cautious expression froze on his face, and he even thought that there was something wrong with his ears. I said, I gave, Knight, to you. Ace repeated his words again, feeling a little puzzled. Is Hawkeye Mahawk's weakness a deaf ear? This time Mahawk really heard it clearly, but his heart was even more entangled. Would someone send out the supreme sharp knife in his hand? This is the supreme sharp knife, not supreme Chinese cabbage. Mahawk thought about paying a price for this trip. The other party may ask for a lot of money and may ask him for help. He can choose to agree or refuse. There is always a way to get, But now the other party doesn't want to do anything. Mahawk was stunned for a moment. He didn't know how to respond. Ace really didn't think too much about it. Although he can improve his strength by devouring famous knives, he has just now possessed the physical strength of a lieutenant general. He doesn't know how long it will take to devour the supreme sword. But in his memory, Hawkeye and are a whole, and only Hawkeye with the supreme sharp knife, on his back is the complete Joracle Mahawk. So Ace decided to give, to Hawkeye. As for the famous sword that will be used to improve his strength in the future, isn't there still 11 handles of the supreme fast sword? Just look for a chance to grab it later. You don't have any conditions. Mahawk still didn't give up and wanted to ask for some clues, but he was destined to be disappointed because Ace just shook his head. There must be a conspiracy. No, I can't owe him that. Mahawk was very determined in his heart. With his pride, if Ace threatened him with this matter after many years, he might have to submit. Thinking of this, Mahawk raised his head, staring at Ace with those yellow pupils, and said seriously, I will stay by your side in the next few days. I will shoot 3 times for you. After finishing speaking, Mahawk took the yi that Ace held in his hand. The moment Mahawk's hand firmly grasped yi, the whole knife suddenly trembled, and circles of black ripples rippling from his blade. This is the sword in excitement. The excitement of meeting a real swordsman with a good knife. Ace touched his nose in embarrassment. He originally thought that his sword skills were already good, but now he realized that Yahad never acknowledged him. Seeing the powerful aura exuded by Yi, Ace has no regrets at all, and his slayer will reach this level sooner or later. This knife is also for you. Hawkeye didn't care about Ace's reaction, and stuffed the big sharp knife that was originally carried behind his back into Ace's hand. It seems that in Mahawk's mind, only giving Ace a big sharp knife, plus his own 3 shots, can barely match the value of the supreme big knife, Yi. Of course, Ace would not refuse. After all, Mahawk is a strong man who can compete with the red-haired Shanks. Although it only took 3 shots, with Mahawk's strength, it may mean 3 more lives for Ace now. Backhanded the big sharp knife into the space of different fires, Ace was also a little excited, and secretly said, although Mahawk can only make 3 shots, why can't he stay in Yandi Pirates forever? Since Mahawk has decided to stay with Ace first, he will not leave for the time being, so he moved his coffin boat to Ace's sailboat. Seeing that Ace was controlling the sailboat all the way straight forward, it seemed that the goal was clear, and Mahawk asked, where are you going? Yo ho ho, the captain is going to the capital of the 7 waters. A skeleton led a child in a straw hat out of the cabin. That's right. Ace said he's going to change to a bigger ship. Luffy turned over excitedly and jumped onto the bow, gesticulating with both hands, as if he was describing the shape of the new ship. Although Hawkeye was a little curious about Brook's appearance, but his face was still full of black lines, he said, do you know where the capital of the 7 waters is? Ace was a little puzzled, and took out a permanent pointer from his arms, and Brook and Luffy also came together, and after observing with Ace for a while, they pointed to the direction of the bow of the ship together, and said with some doubts, that's right, just go this way. Mahawk doesn't know what to say anymore. Is this a crowd of Lu Chis? He reluctantly stretched out a finger, pointing in the direction of the stern of the boat. Going to the capital of 7 waters, you have to go this way. The 3 of them were stunned. Did they drive farther and farther during the half-day together? Get out of the way. Mahawk pushed Ace away with a dark face, and stepped forward to steer the helm. He has been wandering alone on the ocean, and he has good navigation skills, and he can control the boat under his hands like his fingers. But why is this the result? Mahawk was in control of the sailboat. Looking at the 3 of Ace who were discussing how to fish, he was suddenly very confused. He was obviously just looking for the supreme sharp knife, Yi. So why did he become a coolie? No, I must hurry up and let that kid beg me to take action 3 times, so that I can leave here quickly. Mahawk narrowed his eyes and said to himself. Wow. At this moment, Ace raised his fishing rod suddenly, and a 2-meter-long shark burst out of the water. But before Ace got excited, a sea beast head with a diameter of 2 meters swallowed the shark in one gulp, and bite off Ace's fishing rod. Asshole. Ace looked very angry, and hit the head with a punch, and a big bag swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. The next moment, the entire surface of the sea shook, and a huge sea monster with a length of tens of meters rushed out from under the sea surface. Its size was already close to that of a small sea king. Ace opened his mouth wide, and he didn't expect that he would provoke such a huge monster. The eyes of Mahawk on the boat suddenly lit up. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he muttered to himself. It seems that this kid asked me to take action. Pung. Mahawk's smile froze on his face, because Ace's hesitation was only for a moment, and then he punched the monster in front of him. The monster tens of meters long rose into the air under this punch, and left sea. Surface. Land foot. 2 blue sharp blades soared into the air, passing the monster's body in the air. One wiped its neck, and the other cut off the most tender flesh under its fins. Plop. The monster's body fell back into the sea, and a huge piece of tender meat fell on their small sailboat. It wasn't until everything was over that Mahawk regained control of his facial muscles. He suddenly remembered that Ace in front of him was also a bounty criminal with a reward of more than 500 million, and he had quite powerful combat power. It seems that the deadline for him to regain his freedom is indefinitely. Lunch can be improved. Ace happily held up the animal meat, and both Luffy and Brook's eyes lit up and their mouths were drooling. But he was puzzled to find that Hawkeye Mahawk, who had always been very calm, now had a dejected look on his face. Don't he like seafood? 3 days later, the sailboat of Ace and others was still sailing slowly on the sea. Hey, Uncle Mahawk, when will we arrive? Luffy ran around Hawkeye, pouted and said, I'm tired of eating canned food, I'm going to have a big meal. The veins on Hawkeye's forehead twitched. In the past few days, Luffy came to urge him every few hours, which made his head dizzy. Normally, as the #1 swordsman in the world, how could anyone dare to talk to him like that? But he has nothing to do with Luffy. After all, as him, he can't compete with a child. In the end, he could only take a deep breath and said helplessly. Come on, we'll be there in half a day. Luffy, don't make trouble. There is still half a piece of grilled sea beast meat, you take it first. Ace also came over at this time. Meat? Luffy's eyes lit up immediately, and he put all his complaints behind him, picked up the meat that Ace handed over, and gnawed it with relish. Ace smiled knowingly. In fact, this younger brother is still very easy to support. You've worked hard these past few days. Ace walked to Mahawk and thanked him with a smile. Humph. Hawkeye just snorted coldly, and didn't want to answer at all. He has been sailing the boat for the past 3 days, and he is almost a professional helmsman. When did he do such a thing? Ace touched his nose in embarrassment, turned and walked to the other side. There was nothing he could do, after all, almost all the people on board were road idiots, so Hawkeye could only let Hawkeye sail. It's just that Ace didn't see that after he turned around, there was also a smile on Hawkeye's face. Hawkeye has been alone all this time, and this is the first time he has to get along with others day and night. Although sometimes it is annoying, but more often, Luffy and others who have no plans make him feel relaxed after a long absence. Yo ho 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 ho, Captain, come and see. Brook stood beside the boat, pointed at the sea, and shouted in surprise. Ace looked along his fingers, and suddenly saw a dark railway track stretching into the distance under the sea surface, constantly rising and falling with the fluctuation of the waves. The rails of the sea train. When Ace saw this magical man-made object, he couldn't help being amazed, and sighed from the bottom of his heart for Tom's superb craftsmanship. Woohoo! At this moment, a train whistle sounded faintly from the front of the sailboat. Ace and the others looked in the direction of the sound, but failed to see the sea train, but saw a young man with a cannon barrel on his back, standing alone on the rails. In the carriage of the train, Spandam was lying on the sofa, his face was covered with bandages, and half of his teeth were missing. Damn. That brat named Carter Frame, I will never let him go. Spandam covered his eyes, cursing with resentment on his face. That kid dares to hit me, CP5 Commander, he has committed a serious crime. After this matter is settled, I must come back and hang him. The 3 intelligence officers sitting on the opposite sofa looked at each other in blank dismay. Although they had to strictly follow the orders of their superiors, they could still make basic judgments. Their chief Spandam can be said to be extremely vicious. In order to seize the Pluto design from the Murloc Tom, he designed to frame Tom and his apprentices Bingberg and Frankie, so that Tom, who had already been acquitted, re-sentenced to death. And now poor Tom is lying badly wounded in the next car. Mr. Spandam. At this moment, an intelligence officer in charge of the guard pushed open the hatch and rushed in with a panicked face. What's the matter? Spandam growled impatiently. It's Carter Frame. The intelligence agent slammed open the window next to the carriage, pointed to the front of the train and said, he chased here, standing on the rails, with a weapon. Eh? Spandam's eyes popped out in shock. Is this Fram crazy? You know this is a high-speed moving train. How could someone physically stop the train? If you stand in front of the train, you will only be crushed to a pulp. What should I do? Sir. The intelligence agent had never encountered such a thing before, and asked with cold sweat on his face. Are you idiots? Spandam thought for a while, then suddenly showed a cruel smile, and roared. Of course he accelerated and ran over. This is his own court for death. Anyway, he offended me, and sooner or later he has to give he's a death sentence. Just crush him this time. What are you worried about? Yes. Although they felt that this was too cruel, they had to obey the officer's order, so they immediately increased the speed of the train and roared towards Frankie. Yokozuna, you stay there. Frankie, who was in front of the train, let the frog Yokozuna by his side move away. Seeing the train getting closer and closer, he removed the cannon from his back and put it on his shoulder. With a death-willed face on his face, he slammed several shots at the train. Stop. Smoking Tom. Where are you taking your biological father? Boom boom boom. The shells hit the train, but it didn't even break through the outermost layer of armor. Quack. Tears were streaming down Yokozuna's eyes, trying to get Frankie to get out of the way. But Frankie just threw off the barrel, facing the sea train that was already driving in front of him. He suddenly opened his hands and put on a blocking posture. His face was full of tears, and he regretted even more in his heart. If it weren't for the warships he built, Spandam would not have had the opportunity to frame Mr. Tom. I won't let you pass. Give me back Mr. Tom, Frankie yelled, his face turned slightly hideous because of the tense muscles all over his body. Ha 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 ha. Go to hell, idiot. Spandam stretched out his neck from the window, seeing that the train was almost hitting Frankie, his face flushed with excitement. He seemed to have seen Frankie being crushed into a pulp, with blood splattered everywhere. No one can stop this steel behemoth. Swish. Suddenly, at the moment when the train was about to hit Frankie, a boy wearing a red hat suddenly appeared beside him. Facing the roaring sea train, the boy just stretched out a hand calmly. Clang. At this moment, everyone on the train suddenly fell into tinnitus. The sea train with a speed of more than kilometers per hour suddenly changed from a high-speed moving state to a stationary state at the moment it hit the boy's right hand. Boom. Boom. The sections of carriages were all squeezed together in an instant because of the stillness of the front of the car. The huge inertia caused the CP-5 intelligence agents in the train to pile up to the front half of the carriage almost at the same time, and the worst one was of course Spandam, who stuck his head out of the window. With a click, his neck was twisted into a terrible angle, he spun several times in the air, and fell into the carriage without knowing his life or death. Before the train, Frankie still kept his hands stretched forward, looking in disbelief at the sea train that stopped in front of him, only 1 centimeter away from his palms. How? How is it possible? Frankie's eyes widened and he muttered to himself. He was one of the members who participated in the construction of the Smoking Tom, and he clearly knew how terrifying the power of this steel behemoth was. It could be said that even if it was a sea king standing in front of the train, he would be directly smashed through by it. The reason why he came to stop the train was that he never thought of success at all, it was nothing more than a kind of self-salvation. No one can do it. Only monsters. Only a real monster can stop the speeding sea train with bare hands. Hey. Why are you in a daze? Ace let go of the distorted front of the car, helped his cap that was blown crooked by the wind, and turned around with a relaxed expression. Frankie managed to recover from the shock, looked at Ace with a bit of fear, and asked respectfully, "What's your name?" "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself." Ace grinned, "My name is Ace." "Master Ace, this train is going to Judiciary Island, and it is full of intelligence personnel from the world government," Frankie kindly reminded. "Hey, don't worry. The kind of impact just now, it is estimated that there are not many of them alive." Ace didn't care. "I didn't mean it that way." Frankie yelled in his heart, "Don't you worry about the government's revenge?" And many more. Frankie's expression changed suddenly, and the expression on his face became panicked. Mr. Tom is still in the train, and he has been seriously injured. Isn't he already in danger under the impact just now? Thinking of this, he didn't even care if Ace was a monster, so he was about to rush into the carriage. "Mr. Tom. Wait." Ace grabbed Frankie's collar, and Frankie suddenly felt that hand was like an iron hoop, and the force coming from it made him unable to move at all. "You don't have to worry about Mr. Tom, he's over there." Ace pouted to the side. "Yo ho ho ho, I saw that Brooke had put Murloc Tom on Ace's small sailboat." Ace asked Brooke to rescue Tom before doing anything. Frankie felt relieved when he saw that Tom was safe and sound. Just as he was about to express his thanks to Ace, suddenly there were chaotic footsteps from the sea train in front of him. The next moment, the dozen or so intelligence agents who were still alive climbed to the top of the carriage of the sea train with Spandam on their backs. At this time, Spandam's neck was twisted 90 degrees to the right, unable to move, but he was still alive. Feeling the severe pain from his neck, Spandam's heart was already filled with crazy anger. "You guys kill him quickly. Kill this kid with a hat." The intelligence agents looked at each other, but none of them dared to go first. They didn't forget the kid in front of them, who blocked the speeding sea train just now with just one hand. "Whoever gets on will die. Are you all idiots?" Spandam turned sideways, turned his face to Ace, and shouted. "How could someone stop the train with bare hands? It must be that bastard Tom who did something on the train. That brat looks like he's just in his early teens, how could he be a strong man?" Spandam's face was distorted, and he roared ferociously. "Quickly smash this pretentious brat into pieces. Ah! And that Tom, I want him to die." Indeed, it is impossible for someone to stop the sea train with bare hands. The intelligence agents were finally persuaded by Spandam, and rushed towards Ace with weapons in hand. "Master Ace, run away, there are too many of them." Even Frankie believed what Spandam said, maybe it was Mr. Tom's arrangement. "Yo ho ho. Brooke watched from a distance, and said with a smile, "Captain, you are really underestimated." "Hey." Ace looked at the many intelligence agents rushing forward, and could only smile helplessly. In the next second, his figure disappeared in place, and an afterimage was seen passing through the crowd, and then Ace suddenly appeared behind these intelligence agents. When Spandam saw Ace suddenly appearing in front of him, he fell to the ground with a terrified thud, with a terrified expression on his face, and shouted at the intelligence agents hoarsely. "What are you doing? You are all blind, is it? Just let him rush over? Don't shout, they can't answer you anymore." Ace walked in front of Spandam with his hands behind his back, but the smile on his face had long since disappeared. His heart was full of the disgusting guy in front of him. It is killing intent. Plop, plop, plop. As soon as Ace finished speaking, a series of falling sounds suddenly sounded. Those intelligence agents who were still maintaining their momentum sprayed bright red blood one after another from their necks, staining the top deck of the carriage under their feet, and then they all fell down, and it seemed that he was dead. "No. Impossible. How can you be so strong?" Spandam's expression became even more terrified, and he kicked his feet wildly, trying to get further away from Ace. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something, and said to himself with a hint of joy on his face, "By the way, my father even sent 2 members of CP9 to protect me. The members of CP9 are all non-human beings. As long as they make a move, you can kill this brat. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and protect me." Spandam looked at Ace, who was getting closer, and eagerly shouted into the air around him. Ace still kept his hands behind his back, watching Spandam's struggle calmly. Crunch, crunch. There was a tooth-piercing door-opening sound in the air, and immediately behind Spandam, a door slowly opened in the air. Immediately afterwards, 2 figures came out of the gate one by one. Ha ha ha. Spandam's face was still dripping with cold sweat, but after seeing the 2 CP9 members who appeared out of nowhere, he seemed to regain his courage. "Stinky boy. I will never let you run away. You will regret it, met Lao Su. Go. Go." Spandam yelled for a long time, but the 2 didn't move at all. Turning his head, he found that the expressions of these 2 people were extremely dignified. After seeing these 2 people, Ace showed surprise on his face. They turned out to be acquaintances. "Yo, we meet again, Rob Lucci." Hearing Ace's words, Spandam's brain seems to be insufficient. You must know that CP9 is a secret intelligence agency directly under the world government, and the identity of everyone in it is absolutely confidential. Even he only knew that there were 2 people protecting him, but he didn't know their names at all. How could this kid in front of me know? Impossible. He must have made it up. "Well, we meet again." Rob Lucci, still wearing overalls and with a white dove on his shoulder, replied with a complicated expression. Spandam choked on what he was going to say, his neck turned in shock, his eyes protruded. They actually knew each other. His heart was already full of doubts, and his face was full of disbelief, but he still had a fluke mentality. This. So what? Spandam was covered in cold sweat, and tried to comfort himself in his heart. As a member of CP9, you must absolutely obey the command of the commander. They will definitely obey my order and take action to kill this brat. Do you want to keep this scumbag? Ace glanced at Spandam, raised his eyebrows, and looked at Rob Lucci and his fingertips. The eyelids of Rob Lucci and Bruno twitched at the same time, and they subconsciously shook their heads together. Although they didn't see it with their own eyes, it's no secret to every member of CP9 that Admiral Akainu suffered a big loss at the hands of a kid named Ace. What's more, Rob Lucci has personally experienced the power of Ace, and was defeated by Ace. What the hell are you doing? Seeing that the 2 of them didn't want to do anything, Spandam screamed harshly, "You dare to disobey my father's order? Rob Lucci, right? After today, I will sue you severely. Let you walk around without food." Rob Lucci frowned when he heard Spandam's chatter, and snorted coldly, "Noisy." Boom. Lucci raised his foot and kicked Spandam out, and hit the carriage not far away with a bang, screaming and rolling around, blood spurting out of his body continuously. "Mr. Ace, we have no intention of fighting you." It was Bruno who spoke, and he bowed slightly. "Next, that idiot. Please deal with it as you like." "No. You can't do this." Spandam's horrified voice came over, and he never expected that the helpers he called out, those legendary superhuman monsters, didn't even have the intention of doing anything in front of Ace. But Lucci and Bruno ignored Spandam at all. After they nodded to each other, they slapped themselves hard at the same time, and spit out a mouthful of blood. Obviously, they were going to pretend to be wounds after the battle. Then Bruno simply opened the air door and disappeared on the roof of the train with Lucci. Until the figures of the 2 disappeared, Ace didn't make a move, but squinted his eyes, showing a thoughtful expression. It seems that the relationship between Rob Lucci and the world government is not so harmonious. Withdrawing his thoughts, Ace looked coldly at Spandam lying on the side again. This time, Spandam was really desperate. You. Who the hell are you? Spandam's eyes were full of fear. He really didn't know who the kid in front of him was, and CP9 would rather kill himself than fight him. It's ridiculous that I was so arrogant just now, thinking that as long as CP9 makes a move, he can be easily killed. Seeing that the threat was useless, Spandam could only suppress his fear and begged for mercy desperately. My father is the commander of CP9, as long as you let me go, I can give you a lot of money. 100 million Baileys. Ace didn't have any desire to talk to this guy at all, so he reached out and lifted the bruised and swollen Spandam up. 500 million, no, I'll give you 1 billion. Spandam burst into tears, still wanting Ace to let him go. No, you can ask him if he wants to let you go. Ace finally spoke, but casually threw Spandam to Frankie. Do not. Spandam was finally completely desperate. He had framed the three of Tom and his apprentice before, and he was going to kill them. How can it end well if he is sent to Frankie now? But Ace didn't pay attention to him at all, and turned his head directly to enjoy the surrounding scenery. The next moment, Spandam's miserable scream sounded behind him. A few minutes later, there was only a slowly spreading pool of blood left, and Spandam's mutilated body sank to the bottom of the sea with the current. What? Frankie looked at the blood left on his hands and let out a hearty roar, but 2 lines of tears flowed down his face involuntarily. If it wasn't for Ace's help today, Mr. Tom would definitely be gone forever, and he would spend his whole life regretting it. Frankie turned around suddenly, lying on the ground with his whole body, and gave Ace a big gift, saying, "Thank you very much, Mr. Ace. If it wasn't for you, I really don't know what I would do." Ace quickly stepped forward to help him up, and said, "You don't have to do this, I'm just doing it casually." No matter what, you are the savior of our master and apprentice. Frankie's expression was still sincere. Ace couldn't persuade Frankie anymore, so he could only say, "Let's go to the capital of 7 Waters first. I think Mr. Tom is seriously injured and needs to be healed quickly." Ace's words reminded Frankie that he immediately boarded the ship anxiously to check Tom's injuries, and he was relieved when he saw that Tom was breathing smoothly and his life was not in danger for the time being. Immediately afterwards, under the guidance of Frankie, the few people headed straight for the capital of 7 Waters in a small sailboat. Hawkeye has been silently observing Ace's actions this time, seeing everything in his eyes. He suddenly has an inexplicable feeling that this kid's future achievements are absolutely limitless. Perhaps, I can also help him. In the next moment, Hawkeye immediately shook his head, throwing away this ridiculous thought, and he should help him 3 times as soon as possible, so that he can go home and train those baboons. Half a day later, the small sailboat, carrying 6 people and a frog, arrived at the Hulk Island on the side of the capital of 7 Waters. As soon as the boat docked, Frankie hurriedly carried the unconscious Tom and rushed towards Tom's studio. After Ace and the others parked the boat, they also boarded the island and followed. At this time, in Tom's studio, Granny K. Kellogg was gulping down strong wine with Bingshan, Tom's first disciple. Bingshan had no expression on his face, but tears kept falling. The master was framed by that damned Spandam, but he could only watch helplessly as he was taken away by CP5, and his junior brother Frankie was also missing now. Grandma K. Kellogg, I want to change this city. I want to become the mayor of the capital of 7 Waters. Bingshan gulped down a gulp of spirits, and said with firm eyes. You can definitely do it. After all, you are the first disciple of Tom, the world's #1 shipbuilder. K. Kellogg also had tears in his eyes, but he smiled and encouraged Bingshan. Suddenly, with a bang, the door of the studio was knocked open, and Frankie, whose face was covered in blood, rushed in with Tom on his shoulder. Quick, save master. Plop, plop. Bingshan and K. Kellogg stood up in shock, looked at the 2 people at the door in disbelief, and turned over the chairs under them. Frankie. Bingshan's eyes widened, and his heart was full of doubts. He never expected that Frankie would be able to snatch Master Tom back from CP5. But seeing Master Tom already covered in blood, Bingshan swallowed all his doubts, not daring to waste time asking Frankie what happened. He rushed over as fast as he could, picked up Tom, and carried him to the bed in the studio. Let me. Granny K. Kellogg knew some first aid knowledge, turned around and took out a set of medical equipment from the cabinet in the room, and immediately treated Tom as an emergency. He quickly disinfected the wound on his body and quickly put on a bandage. But after all this was done, they found that Tom's face was still extremely pale. At this time, Ace and his team also walked into Tom's studio from outside the door. Don't come here, who are you? Seeing the stranger who suddenly appeared, Bingshan immediately roared vigilantly. Now there are 2 fugitives here. If these people ran out to report, he would not be sure to protect his master and junior. Bingshan. Don't be so rude. This is Mr. Ace and his partners, he is our master's savior. He was the one who rescued the master from that damned spandam. Frankie was afraid that Bingshan would offend his benefactor, so he hurried forward to stop him. After hearing Frankie's words, Bingshan immediately apologized, and bowed deeply to Ace. There is no way to repay a great kindness. If there is anything that needs me, Bingshan will definitely die. Quickly reaching out to help the iceberg, Ace said, I'll talk about these things later, and now I'd better ask Mr. Tom what's going on. Seeing that Ace didn't mean to repay his kindness, Bingshan felt even more grateful to Ace, nodded in response, and turned around and asked, Grandma Kela, how is the master doing now? The situation is not good, Kela said solemnly. Although those guys used anesthesia bombs on Tom is estimated to have been shot dozens of times. Now he has lost a lot of blood and needs a blood transfusion. Then hurry up and give the master a blood transfusion, Frankie said eagerly. How could there be blood bags in our studio? Kela said worriedly, and Tom has blood type E, which is rare, so it's hard to find someone who can match him. But Granny Kela still kept something in her heart. Tom is a Murloc, he has been discriminated against by humans, no one would be willing to donate blood to Murlocs. Is my blood okay? I have blood type E. But at this moment, Ace's calm voice came over, and in his memory, he had this blood type. Kela immediately opened his eyes wide in shock, and stammered, You. What are you talking about? Are you really willing to donate blood? Tang. Tom is a Murloc. What's wrong with the Murloc? Isn't the bleeding red? Ace shrugged indifferently. As soon as this sentence was uttered, not only Granny Kela, but everyone present looked at Ace differently. Human beings have a long history of discrimination against Murlocs. How broad-minded should a person who can say such words without hesitation have? Even Hawkeye, who had been silent all this time, couldn't help but have a little recognition for Ace at this time. This kind of mind is the qualification that a real king must have. Come on quickly. Ace stretched out his arms with a smile, and said, However, you have to buy me some more meat in the future, and make up for it. Meat. Where is it? Luffy, who was sleepy at first, suddenly opened his eyes energetically. The cute appearance made the tense atmosphere in the studio a little easier. Next, Frankie found a set of blood transfusion equipment as quickly as possible. Kela tidied up the equipment, with a touch of emotion on his face, and connected Ace's arm with Tom. The bright red blood flowed slowly in the infusion tube, and Ace finally completely conquered the hearts of Bingberg and Frankie. After a while, Tom's face looked better, and his physical condition finally stabilized. After the blood transfusion, Bingshan brought back a lot of food without Ace even asking, including the specialty, shui shui meat, of the City of Seven Waters. This kind of meat is so tender and delicious that Luffy and others, who are tired of eating canned food, are almost moved to tears. Ace. I want to pack. Luffy ate his stomach into a balloon shape, still unfinished. Haha. You guys stay here for a few more days, and you will be full. Frankie is in a good mood now. But at this time, Bingshan pulled Frankie behind him, and said with a worried face. You guys better leave now. Seemingly afraid that Ace and the others might misunderstand, Bingshan added. Although I can't wait to tear that spandam into pieces, after you kill him, the government will definitely not let it go. So I beg you, bring Tom Master, the farther you go, the better. During the meal, Frankie had already told Bingshan what had happened. Although he was very grateful to Ace and admired Ace's strength, he didn't think that Ace and others could compete with the powerful Navy. Tom needs at least a week of training. Grandma Kela glanced at Tom, who was still unconscious. The iceberg froze, but he really didn't want to put his benefactor's life in danger because of his own reasons, so he finally gritted his teeth and said, Then please take Frankie and go to sea first. I will wait for the master to resume action, and send him away personally. I won't go. Frankie said stubbornly. Shut up. Bingshan finally showed the majesty of his senior brother at this time, and he shouted, Don't you want to kill your benefactor like you did when you framed your master before? There was a flash of pain in Frankie's eyes, and he finally stopped talking. He understood that what his brother said was right. Once the government sent an army, the benefactor would definitely be in a desperate situation. Thank you for your concern, but we don't have to leave. Ace picked up the hat on the dinner table and put it back on, with a confident radiance on his face. As long as it's not a general, no one can stop us. Hawkeye on one side turned his back on Yi, and finally spoke for the first time, and said calmly. Even if it's a general, I can't stop it. Ace's expression changed, and seeing that Hawkeye took the initiative to speak, he felt even better. It seems that after this incident, Hawkeye also has a good impression of them. With a contented smile, Ace grabbed another piece of meat and started to chew. On the other hand, Bingshan and Frankie looked at Ace and the others with different gazes. This group of people seemed to be shrouded in a mysterious halo. Ace's tone was already loud enough, but he didn't expect the swordsman behind him to speak even louder, and he didn't even pay attention to the general. The most important thing is that even though Bingshan and Frankie wanted to refute the aura emanating from them, they couldn't help but believe it. At this time, in the Navy headquarters, the intelligence department received a piece of latest information from CP9. The bounty criminal Fire Fist Ace appeared in the capital of Seven Waters, killed the CP5 chief Spandam, and captured the felon Murloc Tom from Judiciary Island. Whoa. Akainu suddenly crumpled up the information. It's been a week. Now when he sees Ace's name, the wound on his right ear still hurts, and he can't wait to tear it to pieces with his own hands. But now he is restricted by that old guy from the Warring States period, and he is allowed to sit in the Navy headquarters within a month. This is an official order issued by the Admiral of the Navy, and even he must strictly abide by it. But how could Akainu spare Ace just like that, and immediately roared. Come on. Immediately, a secretary pushed the door in and stood aside respectfully. With a gloomy face, Akainu handed him a general's official document. You take my warrant and ask the military department to immediately send 3 senior lieutenant generals from the headquarters to the capital of Seven Waters to capture the fugitive Ace. It doesn't matter if you live or die. After eating and drinking, Ace pulled Bingshan aside and asked with a smile, Mr. Bingshan, I heard that you want to rectify the shipbuilding industry in the capital of Seven Waters? Bingshan waved his hands embarrassingly, and said, that's all drunk talk, and now the master has returned. Compared with the ability of shipbuilding, I am far behind the master. Haha, Mr. Bingshan, don't underestimate yourself, Ace said, I really believe in your ability. Joke. It only took Bingshan 4 years to integrate all the shipbuilding companies in the capital of Seven Waters, and became the mayor's talent. If you want to establish a shipbuilding company, I think I can give you some help. Ace stated his purpose without waiting for Bingshan to speak. Oh? Bingshan's eyes suddenly lit up. In fact, he had already planned to set up a company, but because of lack of funds, the plan had to be postponed. So after listening to Ace's words, Bingshan hesitated for a while, and finally said, I have already prepared the plan to establish the company, but I still need some startup funds. How much do you need? Ace asked. Bingshan was silent for a while, as if he was making calculations silently. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, to build a ship, you need to rent a dock and purchase the corresponding materials. I simply calculated that the initial capital needs to be about 500 million. Bailey. Ace didn't answer right away, but frowned. Bingshan thought that the price he said was too high, and immediately said in a panic, if you rent a smaller dock, you can save another 100 million Baileys. No. I want you to rent the best dock. Ace raised the corner of his mouth and said, if we want to do it, we have to do it best. Let me ask you, if you were given 500 million Baileys, how long will it take you to integrate the entire shipyard? The shipbuilding industry in the capital of Seven Waters. Bingshan did not understand what Ace meant for a while, but after careful calculation, he replied, if I start from scratch, I am confident that I can achieve my goal within 4 years. If I have 500 million startup capital, I can guarantee cut that time in half. Ha ha ha. Good. Ace burst out laughing, very satisfied with Bingshan's answer, then stopped laughing and said, I'll give you 500 million. What? What? Bingshan raised his head abruptly, and looked at Ace in disbelief. He originally thought that Ace thought the price he said was high, but he didn't expect Ace to quadruple it as soon as he opened his mouth. Ace looked at the iceberg, raised a finger, and said, however, I hope that within a year, you can knead the entire capital of Seven Waters into a ball for your use. After Bingshan heard these words from Ace, he calmed down from his excitement. The time was shortened from 4 years to 1 year, and the difficulty doubled geometrically. After bowing his head and thinking for a while, Bingshan said, since the era of the Great Pirate, the shipbuilding industry in the capital of Seven Waters has been hit hard. Only after the sea train, there are signs of recovery here. But even if there are signs, today's the capital of Seven Waters is still in depression, and the major shipbuilding companies are losing money almost every day. If you come back in a few months, I don't dare to boast, but now is indeed the best time to merge major shipbuilding companies. If you give me 500 million Baileys, I can't guarantee that they will completely return to your heart, but our company will definitely be the largest in the capital of Seven Waters. Encouraged by Ace, Bingshan burst out with strong self-confidence at this moment. Okay. Ace was in a good mood when he heard Bingshan's promise, and turned his head and shouted, Brooke, hurry up and get all the gold and silver in the cabin. Yo ho ho, obey, my captain. Brooke's body was extremely light, so he quickly took all the gold and jewelry from the sailboat by the sea. When Ace opened the package wrapped in gold with his own hands, the shining golden light suddenly made everyone's eyes hard to open. Gudong. Bingshan couldn't help swallowing. Although he had long been prepared to see the 500 million Baileys, he was shocked when the 500 million Baileys appeared in the form of gold. Master. Senior brother. Shall I hang out with you in the future? Frankie's eyes widened, and he forgot to argue with Bingshan. No. No, you have to leave the capital of 7 waters with me. At this moment, Tom lying on the bed finally opened his eyes and spoke weakly. Master. Frankie and Bingberg immediately shouted in surprise, and rushed to Tom's bedside together. Although Tom was a little surprised to find that he was still lying on the bed in the studio when he opened his eyes, but as expected of him, he calmly asked what happened to Bingshan immediately. Bingshan immediately recounted the incident in full detail. When he heard that Ace was willing to transfuse him with blood, Tom couldn't keep calm anymore, and tears flowed down his face. Master. What's wrong with you, Master? Bingshan and Frankie had never seen Tom cry. This time they were really panicked. Are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. Tom wiped away the tears on his face, and said, Tiger, my friend, if there were human beings willing to give you blood transfusion 5 years ago, that would be great. Of course Ace knows who the Tiger Tom is talking about, the symbol of liberation and freedom, the hero of the Murlocs, Fisher Tiger. However, as far as Ace knows, Fisher Tiger died of excessive blood loss because he was unwilling to accept human blood. It's not that no one is willing to give him blood transfusions. Of course, it doesn't make sense to say these things now, Ace said seriously. Mr. Tom, humans and Murlocs can coexist. We all bleed the same red blood. Seeing Ace's serious expression, Tom suddenly struggled to stand up, touched his chest with his right hand, and saluted Ace. Mr. Ace, I will definitely keep your words in mind. Bingshan. Next, you do what Mr. Ace said. Tom spoke to Bingshan in a commanding tone for the first time. He felt the hope of peaceful coexistence of humans and Murlocs from Ace. Yes. I will definitely integrate the capital of 7 waters within a year, Bingshan replied respectfully. Tom nodded in satisfaction after hearing Bingshan's answer, then turned his head to look at Ace again, and said, Mr. leaving the capital of 7 waters to avoid retaliation from the government. You can go with us. Ace Wan stayed. But Tom shook his head and said, as a Murloc, my goal is really too big, and I've been out for so long, and I want to go back to Murloc Island to see my old friends. Old friend? Ace frowned slightly. Yes, he is the current captain of the Sun Pirates, Jinbei. Ace couldn't help laughing when he heard the name. Jinbei is his old friend, so Ace didn't insist anymore. For Tom, Jinbei's Sun Pirates is indeed a good place. Mr. Tom, can you give me a word for Jinbei? Ace suddenly remembered something, and said seriously, let him protect Princess Otahime, and be careful of Hody Jones of the Kingdom Army. Although Tom didn't know who Hody Jones was, he solemnly agreed. Mr. Ace, then I'll go to rest first. After sitting for so long, Tom couldn't hide his tiredness. After all, he was still injured. Seeing that it was getting late, Ace first made an appointment with Bingshan to go to the commercial street the next day and exchange the gold for Bailey, which is convenient to use, and then took Luffy and others back to rest. In the naval headquarters, there are already 3 warships ready to go in the military port at this time, and a senior lieutenant general of the headquarters is standing at the bow of each warship. The leader of the group is a huge giant family. The chest of his clothes is covered with medals. He is over 60 meters tall. He is carrying a 20-meter-long giant machete on his shoulders. Even if he stands there motionless, will bring great pressure to people. Who is the target of our operation this time? 3 lieutenant generals from the headquarters were dispatched at once. An orderly in the military port said in disbelief. Even if it is the legendary order to kill demons, it is only 5 generals. Lieutenant generals line up? Don't you know? Another sailor whispered. The target this time is that Vice Admiral Ace who defected from the Navy a week ago. Seeing that the orderly still seemed to be full of doubts, he looked around carefully, and added mysteriously. Did you see the bandage wrapped around the head of Admiral Akainu in the past 2 days? That's what Ace did. I heard that the entire ear of Admiral Akainu was blown off. What? What? The orderly couldn't help but roared out. This Ace can actually hurt Akainu-sama. Keep your voice down. If Admiral Akainu hears it, do you still want to hang out? Another sailor said nervously. Okay, stop talking, go to work. Heh, it's really interesting. After the 2 sailors left, 2 people suddenly came to their original positions. The leader had a swollen face, hands behind his back, a square mask on his head, and a thick jacket on his body, said. It's really the right time to come down from Marie Joya this time. Haha, I'm very interested in this Ace, I want to turn him into my slave. Dear Charlemagne, how can you see such a dangerous guy with your body of gold? The man behind Charlemagne, dressed in black, knelt down on one knee in a panic and said, "My lord, please think again. HMPH. I am the greatest celestial dragon, and no one in this world dares to touch me." Charmarco said arrogantly, "If you dare to refute me again, then I don't mind having one more slave." Although the man in black has the strength of a lieutenant general, he still trembles when he hears it. In this world, the rights of the Tianlong people are supreme, so he dare not be dissatisfied at all. With his hands behind his back, Charmarco was very satisfied with the frightened expression on the man in black's face, so he said excitedly again, "Let's go, let's get on the boat too, and catch that kid named Ace." The next day, on the roof waterway of the capital of 7 Waters, 2 Arrow Rain Blues moved forward quickly. Ha 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 ha. In front of Ace, Luffy stood on the front seat, feeling the sea breeze blowing in front of him, his face flushed with excitement. Bulu is a unique water vehicle in the capital of 7 Waters. Sitting on it and sailing is indeed a magical experience. You can stuff a piece of water and meat into your mouth while driving at lightning speed. Cool. Haha. Although the economy of the capital of 7 Waters is currently in a downturn, the scenery on the island is unique in the whole world. Bingshan sat on another brew, with a whole package of gold behind him, and gave Ace a smile. The two acted as tour guides. About half an hour later, they came to the commercial street of the capital of 7 Waters, but to Ace's surprise, 5 or 6 out of 10 shops here were tightly closed. "Hey," Bingshan sighed, and said, "Everyone's life has been difficult these past few years, I hope it will get better in the future." Bruce drove forward for a short distance, and Bingshan took Ace and Luffy ashore, and walked into the cash exchange office in the center of the commercial street. "Welcome." As soon as the three entered the door, a sweet-looking waitress immediately greeted them with a smile on her face. "Excuse me, what service do you need?" "We have a lot of gold, we have to exchange it for Bailey." Lu Fei danced and gestured. There was silence in the hall first, ha ha ha. Immediately afterwards, a roar of laughter erupted, and the other guests in the hall couldn't help laughing out loud after hearing what Luffy said. Luffy seems to be 7 or 8 years old, whoever has a lot of gold will make children shout like this. They all took it as a joke, but they didn't care too much about Tongan Wuji. How could Luffy have so much scheming? Seeing that they didn't believe it, he opened the package directly. "Look. Wow, hey hey hey." The dazzling golden jewels immediately blinded everyone in the hall. "Is this really true? This kid really didn't brag." Ace looked at Lu Fei with a smile on his face, but Bingshan broke out in a cold sweat. "You must know that the capital of 7 Waters is not a peaceful place now. There are pirates and ruthless bounty hunters everywhere. My little ancestor, don't show it to others so easily." Bingshan quickly wrapped up all the gold again. "Why?" Lu Fei tilted his head and asked with some doubts. "Is it not too much to see?" When the iceberg stopped, he picked up the package a little aggrieved, and walked towards the depths of the store. But Ace couldn't help laughing. If Luffy didn't go offline like this, then he wouldn't be called Luffy. "Luffy, let's go too." Ace didn't care much about those eyes coveting their gold. After all, with his current strength, he could easily kill those gangsters. Just after the three of Ace entered the VIP room in the store, the customers in the entire store were in a commotion and ran out of the store one by one in a hurry. It's been a long time since such a big fat sheep came to the capital of 7 Waters. Apparently, Ace's gold has attracted a group of wolves who smell fishy. But in the corner of the store, 2 guys wrapped in black robes did not move. They waited for a while, but took out a phone bug from their arms. "Dear Mr. 5, we have found the trace of Ace." On the other end of the phone bug, a man's slightly excited voice came faintly, "Ace. A head worth 500 million, I'm not welcome. Keep an eye on him, I'll be right there." "Yes." The two hung up the phone, then retreated back into the shadow of the corner of the store, intentionally or unintentionally looking at the VIP room of Ace and the others. Half an hour later, the door of the VIP room finally opened. Ace and Bingshan each carried 2 suitcases. Behind them were Luffy and the store owner with aggrieved faces. Luffy felt wronged because Ace didn't allow him to take the money, but even though Luffy put on a pitiful look, Ace resolutely rejected his request. "Joke? Let Luffy take the money, it's better to just throw it away." But the boss was scared. Originally, the guy saw Ace and the others face to face, and wanted to trick them, and identified the gold jewelry worth 500 million Baileys as 100 million Baileys. Ace didn't speak at that time, but just reached out and patted the tea table in front of him lightly, and in the next second, the tea table turned into powder. This time the boss was completely honest, and directly ordered someone to fetch 500 million Baileys, and gave the highest exchange price. Distressed, wronged, the boss wants to cry. But Ace can't control his emotions. As for Luffy, there is nothing that can't be solved with a piece of water and meat. If there is, then give him 2 pieces. Ace and Bingshan held a suitcase in one hand, and Luffy held a piece of water meat in the other, and all 3 of them walked out of the cash exchange office in satisfaction. But as soon as they walked out of the gate, they found that a large circle of people had already surrounded the gate. Except for some spectators, there were 2 groups of people standing on both sides of the gate, facing each other with swords drawn. Bossai, we, the Scorpion Pirates, discovered this fat sheep first. The person on the right was actually a woman with heavy makeup, and she kept scratching her head while speaking. Fart. Stinky Scorpion, let me tell you, I'm going to order these Baileys today. The big man on the left had 2 katana swords pinned to his waist, and what he said was tit for tat with the woman on the right. Boom. As soon as the words fell, the young men behind the 2 drew their weapons, as if a disagreement would set off a scuffle. Isn't this Alice, the captain of the Scorpion Pirates, and boss of the Cancer Pirates? What are they doing? A citizen not far away asked in a low voice. That's right, Alice is a great pirate with a bounty of 40 million, and that Bossy has a bounty of 50 million. The fight between the 2 of them will be terrible, they will demolish this place, someone said worriedly. What do you know? I heard that in the cash exchange office, 2 idiots exchanged 500 million Baileys with great fanfare. These 2 adults smell fishy, someone explained mysteriously. After he finished speaking, the people around immediately turned their attention to the 3 of Ace standing at the door. When they saw that there was only one adult, Bingshan, among the 3, their eyes were already full of sympathy. Hey, someone sighed and said, I hope they will hand over the money honestly, so that at least they can save their own lives. After all, I have heard that the captains of these 2 pirate groups are both the guy who kills without blinking an eye. Ace's 5 senses are so developed that all these discussions can be heard. Only then did I realize that these guys at the door are here to steal money. This is unbearable. Hey, you guys are going to fight, get out of the way, get out of my way. The battle between the 2 pirate groups was on the verge of breaking out. At this time, Ace's voice was suddenly inserted, which made them all stop their movements, and all of them showed expressions of disbelief. Is this kid crazy? Boy, you may not know who the uncle next to me is. He is a Cancer Bossai with a bounty of 50 million Baileys. A younger brother wanted to remind Ace and please his captain by the way. As expected, Bossy puffed out his chest. He was proud of his bounty. At the same time, he glanced at Alice and didn't mind hitting his old opponent. It's 10 million higher than that stinky scorpion. Bah. Alice spat at Bossy, and the 2 sides were about to fight again. Bingshan also pulled Ace from behind at this time, and said in a low voice, Mr. Ace, let's go. These 2 guys can be said to be the 2 overlords of the capital of 7 waters, we can't afford to mess with them. Want to leave? At this moment, the 2 pirates turned their gazes over at the same time, but they did not forget their real purpose this time, leave all the money to me. Immediately, a group of pirates looked at the 3 of Ace with green eyes, as if they were about to come forward to snatch their suitcases in the next second. Ace raised his eyebrows, stretched out a finger, and said, I will give you one last chance, and disappear in front of my eyes within 1 minute, or you all don't leave. Wow. As soon as he spoke, there was an uproar all around, and they were all shocked by Ace's arrogant words. Is this kid so ignorant? Those are 2 big pirates with a combined bounty of nearly 100 million. Does he want to court death? Ace couldn't hear their thoughts, otherwise he couldn't help but laugh out loud. A bounty of nearly 100 million, are 2 combined. He has already killed several pirates with a bounty of over 100 million, okay. Ha ha ha. I haven't been so angry for a long time, brat. Bossai laughed back in anger, and said cruelly, now, I have changed my mind. Let me keep you and the money. After finishing speaking, he took a step forward, and while he was moving forward, his body was constantly changing. At the same time, Alice seemed to be afraid that Bossy would take the money all by himself, so they also stepped forward together, their bodies making teeth-stinging joint friction sounds as they moved. After a while, the 2 humans who were originally on the scene disappeared, and a huge crab and an ugly scorpion covered in purple carapace appeared out of thin air. Evil. Devil fruit ability user. The spectators at the scene, seeing those 2 terrifying monsters, no longer dared to stay where they were, and all turned and fled in panic. Ah ha ha ha. Be afraid. Brat, it's useless even if you regret it now. Bossai moved his 8 short legs, posing in a posture that he thought he was domineering. Ace held back for a long time before he squeezed out 2 words, it's ugly. Boss's arrogant expression froze on his face, and Alice was trembling with anger. As a woman, since she ate this fruit, she hated others to say she was ugly. Go to hell. Alice yelled out suddenly, her voice was extremely sharp, the poisonous scorpion tail at the end of her body stabbed at Ace suddenly, and the gloomy light glowing on the tip of the tail was obviously a terrible poison. There was a vicious smile on Alice's face. Everyone who was attacked by her would be poisoned by the scorpion. The death was extremely miserable, and the body would turn into pus in an instant. She seemed to have seen the scene of Ace's tragic death. But in the face of this blow, Ace's face did not fluctuate. His left hand was behind his back, his right hand was raised, and he just stretched out a little finger, and the armed domineering instantly covered it. Clang. Ace's fingers collided with the sharp scorpion tail suddenly, and sparks flew out. Are you going to cut my nails? Impossible. Alice's eyes widened, and she screamed. You must know that the tip of her tail is as sharp as a sharp knife. How could someone block it with just physical strength? Alice, who still didn't believe in evil, frantically swung her tail and stabbed Ace's vitals from various tricky angles. Although Ace's movements didn't look fast, he could always block her tail at the last moment, and seeing Ace's relaxed face, he was at ease. Soon, Alice's face was covered with cold sweat, and now she finally saw that Ace's strength was not at the same level as theirs. At this moment, a minion behind them looked more and more familiar with Ace, especially the orange cowboy hat, which made him always have a feeling of déjà vu. After staring carefully for a while, when he saw the freckles on Ace's cheeks, he finally remembered who the child in front of him was, and the expression on his face suddenly became terrified. A few days ago, the captain asked him to get a new arrest warrant, and the child in front of him was on one of the arrest warrants. In a panic, he took out a stack of wanted warrants from his arms, hurriedly took out the one that belonged to Ace, and looked at the bounty amount at the bottom of the wanted warrant with some trembling. 500 million. I almost couldn't grasp the arrest warrant in my hand, so I could only hold the arrest warrant high, and shouted with trembling lips, Captain, run away, he's Ace. Who is Ace? At this time, the thoughts of everyone on the scene, but when the pirates saw the terrifying amount on the wanted warrant from a distance, everyone looked at Ace in astonishment, and their faces were completely replaced by fear. The bounty is 500 million. Their captain is just a fraction of others. Run. Not daring to resist at all, the pirates couldn't care less about their captain, and turned around and fled in all directions one by one. Hey, Ace sighed, and said, I've already given you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. As soon as the words fell, an orange snake-shaped flame drilled out from Ace's chest and crawled onto Ace's palm. Ace looked at the pirates fleeing in all directions, with a chilly expression on his face, raised his hand and pointed the little snake at them, and said softly, My heart is on fire, burn. Call. The running pirates suddenly felt all kinds of complicated emotions rushing out of their hearts at the same time. Happiness. Angry. Sorrow. Happy. It kept appearing alternately in their hearts, and in the next second, a strange fire ignited from their hearts, gushed out instantly, and spread to every corner of their bodies. Silently, without even a chance to scream, these pirates turned into ashes at the same time. Hiss, the little snake transformed from the fallen heart flame spit out its tongue and rolled it twice, sucking the heart fire remaining in the ashes of the pirates into its mouth, and contentedly drilled back into Ace's heart. However, Bossy and Alice, who were facing Ace, behaved a little strangely at this time. With their willpower, of course, it was impossible to stop the burning of their hearts. However, even though they were already dead, their bodies did not turn into ashes at this moment. Instead, a wisp of black smoke kept trembling, and faint screams came from the black mist. Ace's heart moved, and he took out the big knife, Zumo, with his backhand, and slashed lightly at the black mist in front of him. Puff. There was a shrill scream, and then two vague demon heads were cut in half, and the black mist finally turned into blue smoke and dissipated. And Ace also felt that the quality of Slayer in his hand had improved a little. Ace looked at the corpses of the two people in front of him, and because of the disappearance of the black mist, they collapsed into two pools of ashes, muttering thoughtfully. Can the fire of the heart draw the curse of the devil fruit? Doesn't that mean that as long as I can draw out the fire of others without hurting them, the curse of the devil fruit can be lifted? And when Ace was thinking, the people who had just fled had already discovered the situation here, and all of them opened their eyes wide, looking at the piles of ashes on the ground, all showing expressions of astonishment. What's going on? Where are Bossy and Alice? Maybe the two puddles of ashes on the ground are them. Someone pointed to the ground, and he seemed to be in disbelief. Those two hateful pirates who dominated the capital of the Seven Waters have now turned into ashes all over the ground. And the arrest warrant for Ace floated in front of them at this time, and the bounty of 500 million was clearly displayed at the bottom of the arrest warrant, dazzled their eyes. More than twice the combined value of Boss and Alice. Gudong. I don't know who was the first to swallow the saliva, and then the sound of swallowing saliva sounded one after another, and the body began to retreat unconsciously. Joke. There is a super bounty criminal with a bounty of 500 million in front of him. What a vicious person must be to have such a high bounty. They glanced at the ashes in front of Ace, and suddenly shuddered at the same time. The next second, everyone screamed, turned around and ran, fearing that they would run too slowly and be burned by Ace. Huh. The surrounding voices woke Ace from his thoughts. He looked at the frantically fleeing crowd and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with them?" The iceberg behind him had black lines all over his face, and he thought to himself, "I'm scared by you." But even though he complained in his heart, Bingshan was once again shocked by the strength displayed by Ace, and he was once again glad that he made the right choice. Okay. Now that the money has been exchanged, let's go back. Ignoring the civilians, Ace put away the devil with his backhand, and boarded the swordfish brew in the waterway first. And Luffy and Bingshan also followed. But at this moment, at the corner of this street, two people, a man and a woman, are looking in this direction. The woman among them was wearing a green dress dotted with lemon patterns, but she was in cold sweat at this moment, and said nervously, "Mr. 5, this kid named Ace is too strong, shouldn't you report to the president first?" Obviously, she has seen everything that happened just now, and Ace's strength has already made her want to quit. "Miss Valentine's Day, I'm not those two idiots just now. As bounty hunters, we need to use our brains when we kill targets. Don't worry, my plan will be foolproof." The man next to him in a brown robe is obviously Mr. 5, he said confidently. "You have to believe in my ability to explode fruit. I have already filled their blues with explosives. As long as I snap my fingers, I will. It will be. How?" Ace's cold voice suddenly sounded behind them. Swish. Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day subconsciously jumped apart, looking at Ace who was so close to them. Their clothes were drenched in cold sweat almost instantly. "You. When did you come here?" Mr. 5 was sweating, with a terrified face, and his speech became stuttering. "Anyone who encounters such a thing will be horrified. We are discussing the assassination of the family. As a result, others are listening behind you, which is scary to think about." But when Mr. 5 saw his dynamite bag in Ace's hands, he suddenly became terrified. "Since you were courting death yourself, don't blame me." Mr. 5 gave a sinister laugh, then moved his right hand and snapped his fingers suddenly. Boom. The explosive package exploded in an instant, and the turbulent fire set off a large cloud of smoke and dust, and Ace's figure disappeared directly inside. Ha. Ha ha. Mr. 5 wiped the cold sweat off his brow, and laughed out loud. A pirate with a bounty of 500 million is nothing more than that. Miss Valentine's Day opened the umbrella at this time, and her body seemed to have no weight, and she flew up on the blast wave. She also said excitedly, "In addition to the Navy's bounty, we can also receive personal gifts from the underground world. There are a total of 500 million Baileys in reward." Call. Suddenly, the smoke and dust covering the alley disappeared in an instant, and the two of them were shocked to find that there was no one there. "Who are you looking for?" Ace's voice appeared behind Mr. 5 again, already full of murderous intent, if he hadn't discovered these bombs in advance. After the bomb went off, he might be fine, but Luffy is not as strong as him. Maybe this time he will be in danger. For this alone, Ace will not let go of Mr. 5 in front of him. Base. A flash of cold light flashed, and Mr. 5's horrified expression was permanently frozen on his face. Turbulent blood spurted out from his neck, and after a while, he fell to the ground completely breathless. Miss Valentine's Day in the sky saw that Ace killed Mr. 5 in an instant. Her legs were already so frightened that she could only desperately ride the airwaves to fly far away, hoping to avoid Ace's pursuit from the air. Moonstep. But she was doomed to be disappointed. Ace stepped on the moonsteps and quickly lifted into the air, grabbed her by the throat, and pulled her out of the air. Miss Valentine's Day was held in the air by Ace with one hand. Feeling that she was about to suffocate, she struggled and shouted, "Kilogram fruit, 10,000 kilograms." She wanted to control her weight and crush Ace's arm to gain a chance to escape. But after she finished yelling, she found that Ace was still holding her up with one hand, without even a slight tremor in his arm. How can it be? Is this man a monster? He can lift 10,000 kilograms with one hand. Miss Valentine's Day finally has nothing but despair in her heart. Facing a powerful monster like Ace, she doesn't even have the slightest idea of resisting now. Thump. But at the next moment, Ace did not kill her, but threw her aside casually, with his hands behind his back, and said in a cold tone, "I know you are a senior agent of the Baroque Work Agency. Please give me a message for you, President. What happened today? I will personally go to him to settle the matter later. Now, get out." Miss Valentine's Day no longer wanted to think about why Ace knew their identities. Hearing that Ace wanted to let her go, she immediately stood up in embarrassment and fled the alley as quickly as possible. Ace looked at the back of Miss Valentine's Day, and narrowed his eyes slightly. The information he got today really made him feel that his trip was worthwhile. First of all, he finally knew that the first bounty the Navy set for him was as high as 500 million berries, which further showed the Navy's fear of him. Secondly, according to Mr. Five Words, there is actually a mysterious person in the underground world who has placed a personal bounty of 500 million for him, with a total bounty of 500 million Baileys, which will definitely attract more people for him. Powerful enemies. Ace himself is not afraid, but Luffy has been following him. If he is accidentally caught and used to threaten him, or even kills Luffy, Ace will regret it for the rest of his life. It seems that we need to strengthen the training of Luffy. We need to make him stronger as soon as possible. Luffy, who was still eating water and meat, didn't know his brother Ace was thinking of a way Aga and torture him up. Last but not least, the mysterious president of Baroque Studio is actually Crocodile, an ability user of the rustling fruit of the natural system. Now that some of the studio's senior agents are eyeing Ace, it means that the time for the two of them to meet is not too far away. Although Crocodile's bounty is only 81 million Baileys, Ace will not underestimate his strength. What this guy likes most is to stand behind the scenes and use tricks to achieve his goals, so this bounty amount is far lower than his real strength. And that mysterious man, who is it? Ace bowed his head and thought for a while, and suddenly a flash of inspiration occurred, and a name appeared in his mind. Doflamingo. Among the people Ace offended, who both hated him and had money, this guy was the only one. Ace's pupils shrank. If his guess is true, sooner or later he will erase the entire Don Quixote family from this world. Ace, it's time to go home for lunch. At this time, Luffy's voice came from afar. Ace was speechless for a while, and slandered. Dear brother, haven't you been eating all the time? Why are you still thinking about lunch? However, Ace complained in his heart, and threw out a ball of flames, turning Mr. Five body into ashes. Ace yelled as he walked. Coming. After running for more than a dozen streets in a row, Miss Valentine stopped panting heavily, and the look of horror on her face did not disappear for a long time. That Ace is so powerful that he might be able to kill himself easily. And it seems that he is going to find trouble with the work agency in the future? But Miss Valentine's Day will not worry about those emotionless colleagues. Her heart is now a mess. The rules of the work club are that if the mission fails, it will be dealt with. So she can't go back to the work club at all now. After thinking for a while, she seems to have made up her mind. Miss Valentine found a chance to write what Ace wanted to bring to the president on a note, and stuffed it into the two bottom floors of the work club, in the member's pocket. Then, he left the capital of Seven Waters without looking back. As for when Mr. Zero received this news, it was not something she would care about. Quiet Belt, Daughter Island. The 9 snake pirates are getting ready to go. On the pirate ship driven by 2 giant snakes, the 3 Boya sisters are standing on the bow. Sister, this is the first time you have sailed since you became the Empress of Amazon Lily. Second sister Boya Sandasonia said with some concern, don't expect any accidents. Hey. Hancock put on a coquettish attitude and said, are you kidding me? If I want anything, they will rush to give it to me, because my concubine is beautiful. Now, 9 snake pirates, let's go. The Murloc's physical fitness was really abnormal. 3 days later, Tom's injuries had recovered by 70%, and there was no problem getting out of bed and moving freely. Mr. Ace, my body is fine. I asked Bingshan to prepare some supplies for us. Let's go separately tonight. Tom seemed to be a little afraid of the world government, so after he recovered a little, he wanted to leaving the capital of Seven Waters. Ace was about to nod. After all, there was no practical benefit, and he would not take the initiative to trouble the Navy. But at this moment, Frankie, who had been watching the ship by the sea, suddenly opened the door and ran in with a panicked face. No, I was just repairing the watchtower of the ship of the Scorpion Pirates, and saw there are 3 naval warships rushing to the capital of Seven Waters. After destroying the Cancer and Scorpion Pirates, Ace certainly would not waste their resources, and immediately let Frankie and the others take all the property of the 2 pirates in one pot. In addition to the 2 good pirate ships, the total of about 500 million Bailey in the ship is also cheaper than Ace. But now is not the time to think about this. Ace's eyes have narrowed slightly. He doesn't think that the 3 naval ships are here to see the scenery. Ace didn't speak, but silently took out Devil Demon, carried it on his shoulder, and walked towards the seaside alone. If there is a general, remember to call me. Mahawk crossed his hands in front of his chest, embracing the supreme sharp knife. Yi. There was no extra emotion in his voice, but Ace also showed a smile on his face. It is good. When talking, Ace didn't stop at his feet, and the location of Tom's studio was not too far from the seaside, so Ace arrived at the seaside soon. He jumped onto the watchtower of a pirate ship, and the huge size of the 3 warships was reflected in Ace's eyes. On the warship in the center, the giant lieutenant general with a height of nearly 60 meters is particularly eye-catching. Is the leader only a lieutenant general? Ace raised his eyebrows. At first, everyone was only a lieutenant general, so it is unlikely that there will be any generals in these warships. If there are no quasi-general level powerhouses here, then you will look down on me. After Ace said this, he couldn't help laughing. Before he knew it, he could ignore the lieutenant general. During this period, the 3 warships had rushed towards here at high speed. Seeing the 2 pirate ships on the shore, the warships did not hesitate at all. Fire. The roar of the giant lieutenant general was faintly heard, followed by the roar of the artillery, and dense shells fell towards Ace like raindrops. The firepower of 10 warships can completely destroy a small island, and the shells fired by 3 warships at the same time are also amazingly powerful, but Ace's expression did not change at all. Mirror flame. With a low shout, flames surged out of Ace's body, and when they just burst out of Ace's body, it was just a thin, small pillar of fire. But after rushing out 10 meters, the pillar of fire has spread into a monstrous fire. The flames even formed a gigantic curtain, and the densely packed cannonballs, when they rushed into the fire curtain, all of them turned into a ball of flames and blended into it, without exception. The barrage of shells fired by the 3 warships was blocked by Ace alone. Is this the elite navy you call yourself? Saint Charmico, the celestial dragon, was also standing on the warship in the middle at this time, and said with contempt. Just relying on you trash, how can you serve us noble Tianlong people? Lieutenant General John, the giant, could feel the veins popping out of his forehead, but he didn't dare to refute any word Charmarco said, because no matter how despicable and shameless the Tianlong people are, they will always be the most noble nobles in the world, and they can be decided by a casual sentence. Their future and destiny. Dear Charlemagne, I will capture that ace for you. No matter how upset John felt, he could only honestly follow Charmarco's words at this time. After a while, the wall of fire disappeared slowly, and Ace's figure also appeared in the eyes of everyone in the navy. John stared at the small figure that was only the size of his palm, but he didn't dare to be careless at all. After all, the man on the other side could catch at Ace, the Akainu general's tricks. John solemnly drew out the 20-meter-long machete from his waist, and shouted. All the warships are on standby, and you are no longer allowed to participate in the next battle. After a pause, seeing the warships slowly stop, John continued to shout, Mark, Andy. Let's go. After finishing speaking, John's figure sank suddenly, and then jumped up in the next second. The 60-meter-high figure was extremely flexible, and he crossed the tens of meters of sea at an astonishing speed, and the giant knife pointed at Ace. Cut off. And behind him, 2 figures wearing Lieutenant General's cloak followed John and rushed out at a faster speed. Obviously, they were the other 2 lieutenant generals from the headquarters, Mark and Andy. The moment the 3 lieutenant generals jumped out, the sea where the warship was located shook violently. Obviously, when they jumped out of the warship, the huge reaction force made the huge warship unable to maintain stability. And when Ace saw that it was not a lieutenant general who came this time, but 3 lieutenant generals from the headquarters, his pupils shrank first, and then he murmured. You really think highly of me. There was no fear in his tone, but a little bit of excitement. That's right. So much fun. John's broadsword has already rushed at this time, and the 20-meter blade can even directly split the pirate ship under Ace's feet in half. The spirit fire essence art broke out in an instant, feeling the powerful force in his body 5 times that of an ordinary lieutenant general. Ace's eyes gleamed, and the devil in his hand slashed straight at John's big knife without any fancy. Court death. John's eyes flickered fiercely, the corner of his mouth raised a smile, and the strength in his hand was strengthened by 3 points. No one dares to compete with the giants for strength. Clang. Devil demon. It is not 1/10 the size of the machete in John's hand, but at the moment when it collided with the machete, the huge force transmitted from it made John's smile suddenly froze on his face, and his machete can't advance half a point. Impossible. How can you, a small human being, have the power to rival mine? Boom. Click. Click. After a while, the roar of sword clashing came out, and the pirate ship under Ace's feet was shattered into pieces, turning into nitrate powder. The power was transmitted to the surface of the sea, and waves as high as 10 meters were set off, roaring towards the surroundings. You dare to destroy my ship? Ace looked at the sawdust covered in the sea under his feet, feeling very distressed. This is already his boat. It seems that we can only take your warships as compensation. Ace's face was full of anger, and the right arm holding the knife swelled suddenly, and then, Zumo, suddenly lifted up, and John was blown away with the knife. How could you have such great power? John's huge figure was lifted into the air, and he roared with horror on his face. Ace just sneered. Before his physical strength reached the lieutenant general level, he could punch Ozzy twice, not to mention that he has broken through to the lieutenant general level now. Without answering what John meant, Ace blocked the attacks of the other two lieutenant generals with 2 flips. As the lieutenant generals of the Navy, Mark and Andy both mastered the two-color arrogance, but they were shocked to find that Ace's arrogance was even stronger than them. Let's do it together. John's abdomen exerted force, and his body sank suddenly, stabilizing his thrown body. Cooperating with Mark and Andy, he waved the machete in his hand and slashed towards Ace again. Mark and Andy were also on the left and right, with the domineering, armed color on their fists, and they attacked Ace's abdomen. With the joint attack of the 3 lieutenant generals of the Navy headquarters, even the strongest of the quasi-admiral level can only temporarily avoid their edge. Ha ha ha, good job. But facing the imminent crisis, Ace raised his head and let out a hearty laugh. In an instant, raging flames of various colors burst out from Ace's body, including the blue Chinglian earth heartfire, the fiery red volcanic stone flame, and the orange snake-shaped falling heart flame that climbed onto Ace's shoulder. Sizzle. The snake letter hesitated, and the 3 admirals who were originally imposing suddenly changed their faces, and countless negative emotions surged in their hearts instantly, and a hot feeling arose in their hearts. It was the falling heart flame that sparked their fire, but the lieutenant general was a lieutenant general after all, and his will was not comparable to those of the third-rate pirates. The heart fire did not turn into a solid body, and directly burned them all. However, their attacking movements have also been severely deformed. How could Ace let go of this opportunity? Slayer raised his head and slashed at the 3 people in front of him suddenly. Flames of various colors followed the blade and swarmed forward, as if forming terrifying giant flames. The beast opened its fiery mouth and swallowed the lieutenant generals in one gulp. Originally, 3 lieutenant generals besieged Ace, but in a blink of an eye, the situation changed drastically, as if Ace alone surrounded the 3 of them. The lieutenant generals are already busy fighting with their own negative emotions at the moment. How can they maintain their attacking moves? They can only retract their arms hastily, trying their best to protect themselves. Boom. John was the first to bear the brunt in front of Ace. Even though he was nearly 60 meters tall, he was completely swallowed by the flames swayed by Ace. The high temperature burned all his clothes and hair in an instant. The blast of the flames sent him flying backwards. Although Mark and Andy were not the main targets of the flames, they were also scorched and embarrassed at this time, and a scorched smell came from them. Wow. John spouted blood and flew out backwards, but as soon as the blood spewed out of his mouth, it was evaporated into a blood mist by the high temperature. His huge body fell to the surface of the sea, and the flames around his body instantly evaporated a large amount of seawater. Immediately, this large area was covered in mist. In an instant, the strongest lieutenant general was seriously injured. The other 2 lieutenant generals were also unable to move, their faces were ashen, and they barely resisted the flames on their bodies with all their domineering aura. Ace stood with the knife in his hands, stepping on the moon, and the 3-color flames swirled around his body, like an emperor in the fire, exuding a monstrous momentum invisibly. Is he so strong? The cloak on Mark had already been reduced to ashes, and it took a lot of effort to get rid of the flames on his body, but only 50% of his 100% strength was left at this time. He looked at the giant John who fell on the sea and was blackened by the flames. His face had become extremely gloomy. Didn't the data say that this Ace can only use 2 colors of flames? One is purple and the other is cyan. Andy said angrily. Why are there more red and orange? And these flames, can it also affect our emotions? Didn't this Ace even use his full strength in the face of General Akainu? Or are those idiots in the intelligence department eating dry food? Now they dare not continue to shoot anymore. Looking at Ace, who was enveloped in flames not far away, they couldn't help but feel a little fear in their hearts. At only 12 years old, he already has the strength to crush a lieutenant general. If he is allowed to grow like this, what kind of enemy the Navy will face in the future? Thinking of this, Mark didn't hesitate any longer. A fierce look flashed in his eyes, domineering suddenly wrapped around his right thumb, and then suddenly thrust into his left chest. Domineering instantly stimulated Mark's heart. The veins on Mark's forehead were exposed, but there was a powerful force surging out of his body. Mark, you can't do this. Andy on the side saw Mark's movement and cried out in shock. He also knows that after using this secret method, he can temporarily gain strength beyond his own strength, but once this battle is over, no matter what the result is, Mark's strength will definitely drop by 1 level, and he will never be able to advance an inch. We can't let this Ace leave alive. He's too much of a threat to the government. Mark's face was already a bit hideous. Although he has now broken through the limit of a lieutenant general and temporarily gained the power of a quasi-general level, the pain of using the secret method is tormenting him. Andy stopped talking. He knew what Mark said was right, but the price was too high. Andy looked at Ace with hatred. This time, Mark temporarily gained the strength of a quasi-general with great determination, and he will definitely be able to kill this nasty guy. Ace waved away the flames surrounding him, staring at Mark not far away, his eyes narrowed slightly. He saw all of Mark's actions, and he was also a little moved by Mark's sacrifice of himself to maintain the loyalty of the world government. But, that's it. Enemies are enemies. Are you a general? Ace held a knife in both hands, his face gradually became serious, and the powerful aura he exuded suddenly subsided, as if he had become an ordinary person with no power to restrain a chicken again. Is your name Mark? I think you can't last long in this state. I respect your choice, so please come up with your strongest move, and we will use one move. Let's decide the outcome. While speaking, Ace's aura continued to increase slowly but steadily, getting stronger and higher, and even after reaching the previous limit, there was still no tendency to stop. The flames of two colors entwined towards the blade in Ace's hand, and the sea surface under Ace's feet gradually sank because of the terrifying temperature here. It is good. Mark already has unprecedented power, so even in the face of Ace, who is constantly rising in momentum, he is extremely confident in his heart at this time. The next moment, Mark didn't wait for Ace to continue, but suddenly appeared in front of Ace in a flash. The terrifying power belonging to the quasi-general was all concentrated on Mark's right fist at this moment. Boomed towards Ace without fancy. Before the fist arrived, Ace's skin had already felt a tingle, but Ace didn't panic in the slightest. The Slayer, in his hand was shining with two-color flames, and suddenly moved at this moment, and greeted him at a slow but impossible to dodge speed. Two-color stacking flame slash.